Chapter 1035. After receiving Soren's promise, the sigil was very fast. The fallen witch, as Soren's intimate partner, quickly gained the trust of the arcane survivors, and brought the Mies's core back to the material plane. However, the survivors of the arcane empire also asked Soren to find them a quiet land in the material plane, where they could temporarily avoid the eyes of the gods. Until now, many gods were hostile to the survivors of the arcane empire, especially the Droll of the Nature sect. Fortunately, Soren had a lot of land, and it was impossible for him to give them a piece of land in the outer islands. However, there was a piece of land in the Far East that was discovered by the pirates under his command. The area of the land was not small, and it was also the result of their own actions. Soren was going to let them go to the land with strong radiation to see what they had done. If not for Soren's protection, these people would have to hide in the sigil until they died of old age. Only the sigil city, where the gods could not enter, could protect the survivors of the arcane empire from being hunted down by the Droll. The self-sacrifice of the oak tree's father made many powerful Droll angry and hateful towards them. After getting the Mies's core, Gloria left to prepare a large-scale teleportation circle, and Soren also used the power of the divinity to space change to prepare for it. About a day later, a portal was opened in the shadow plane, and then Soren used the power of the divinity to send a huge crystal ball over the Mies's core. Soren felt that the space was instantly filled with energy, and murmured, "It's worthy of being called a divine artifact since the age of thorium." The Mies's core was a huge magic device. It looked like a crystal ball, but it was 150 feet in diameter. The ball emitted a very bright light, as dazzling as the sun, and there were some slightly dark shadows on the surface. Below it was a gorgeous pedestal that held the perfect spherical device. Its function was to extract the raw energy of the magic network and transfer it to the crystal ball as the center. It could automatically supply energy to quasi-magic items, and at the same time, it allowed arcanists to create quasi-magic items without having to consume constitution points, soul energy, or cast permanence. Simply put, within the range of the Mies's energy core, the requirements to create all magical items were greatly reduced, and the success rate was astonishingly high. This was a very abnormal ability. This was also the reason why the Arcane Empire was able to achieve mana, and at the same time, many magic tools could be popularized among the commoners. Elemental fission only provided the basic energy source, but the Mies core could increase the chances of all spellcasters within the territory to create magic items, and at the same time, reduce the cost of creating magic items. During the era of the Arcanum Empire, every floating city required at least one Mies energy core, which was an important component that allowed the city to float. However, the power of the Mies core also had a limitation, and that was that it could only be used within a range of 1 to 3 kilometers. If the diameter of a territory exceeded this area, more than one Mies core would be required. This was because there would be a core area in the floating city, and only wizards who were powerful enough could live near it and enjoy the power of the Mies core. If the power of the Mies core went beyond this area, the effect would quickly weaken, and it would only be able to maintain the basic energy supply, just like a natural nuclear power plant. As a powerful artifact, the Mies core itself was a very dangerous thing. Touching the Mies core was a fatal act, and any mortal who touched the device would be killed instantly, regardless of the test of immunity. Any object, even magic items, that touched the Mies core, except for the pedestal, would be instantly disintegrated, and any undead creatures that touched the Mies core would be destroyed immediately. Mortals could not touch the Mies core, or they would be destroyed instantly. This was because the Mies core contained a terrifying amount of energy. Is this the legendary artifact, the Mies core? Alice looked at the crystal ball in front of her with a fascinated expression and murmured, "What a terrifying amount of energy. I can feel the surging magic energy nearby." Soren nodded and said, "Yes. This is the Mies core. The legendary artifact that can extract the power of the magic network." Whether it was the age of thorium or the Arcane Empire, the creation of a Mies core required a large number of spellcasters with a profession level of 30 and above, and these spellcasters had to pay a price in the process of creating the Mies core. There were no records of the age of thorium. However, in the thousands of years of the arcane empire, there were less than 20 mies cores created. Even with the power of the entire arcane civilization, there were only so many mies cores created in the span of 1,000 years. One could imagine how precious the mies core was. "We can start now." Gloria's expression was a little excited, and she said to Soren excitedly, "Get ready to send the mies core into the arcane tower." Soren nodded. Divine form. Reality change. Space change. The only one among these people who could remove the mies core was Soren, and he had to be in his divine form. He turned into a golden giant hundreds of meters tall, held the mies core in the void, and then sent it into the arcane tower with the power of divinity. The next moment, powerful energy burst out directly, and all the magic crystals around all lit up. The magic lock that enveloped the space seemed to be fully charged all of a sudden, and it automatically activated to cover a range of 20 kilometers. At the same time, it also activated the energy barrier. But this was only the most basic. The real power of the mies core was that in addition to the huge amount of energy, it could also connect to the magic network and activate the anti-magic field. "You can get ready now." Soren gasped and turned into the holy form, then said to Gloria, "Get ready to start the test." Gloria nodded with a serious expression. The next moment, she appeared directly at the top of the arcane tower. She clenched the scepter of Savras and tapped it gently. Then an invisible wave of energy spread toward the city of Moder. There was a burst of exclamation. Within the range of Moder, all the wizards under Gloria's command and other wizards from other places were instantly disconnected from all the magic connections. They instantly found that their casting ability had all disappeared. Not all of them had disappeared. Some wizards above level 15 still retained their spellcasting ability, but they were still affected by the interference. They looked at the sky in surprise, not knowing what happened at this moment. Fortunately, the activation time of the anti-magic field was very short, and they soon regained the ability to cast spells. It worked. Gloria walked down with a smile on her face and nodded. "The anti-magic field has been activated." Within the range of the anti-magic field, the casting ability of middle-grade wizards will be completely sealed. Next step. It's time to prepare the casting license. In order to prevent the abuse of magic energy, especially in a special place like the floating city, Soren must prohibit other wizards from causing damage. The anti-magic field was not only used for fighting, but also to ensure the safety of the floating city. Chapter 1036. Black Key Valley. The raging fire ignited the valley, and the screams of humans could be heard from time to time. An elegant silver dragon hovered in the sky, and next to it was a gold dragon and a copper dragon. At this moment, there were many corpses in the valley. Most of them were members of the dragon cult, and some of them were elves. In order to help the dragons destroy the Dracolic, the nearby forest rangers corresponded to the covenant. At the same time, the goddess of the forest, Marikai, seemed to be disgusted by the existence of the Dracolic and gave some help. However, the battle was not a one-sided situation. Among the members of the dragon cult below, there was a wizard wearing a purple robe, which was the symbol of a top member. Half of them were legendary mages and liches. A dead black dragon turned into a Dracolic had fallen in the valley. Under the siege of 3 adult dragons, the newly resurrected Dracolic could not hold on for long. The dragons besieged the purple-robed wizard, while the other rangers waited for an opportunity to move. In the shadows, a tall and graceful figure slowly walked onto the battlefield. No one seemed to have noticed her arrival. She walked up to one of the dead high-ranking members of the Dragon Witch cult and waved her hand, extracting a soul from the corpse. "Finally found you." Verges, the goddess of magic and death, showed a satisfied smile and murmured, "God of liches. Let's see where you can run this time." As a god from another world, Verges, the goddess of magic and death, had the ability to understand death. She used the power of magic to extract the soul and interpret it. For so long, she had been tracking the traces of the god of liches. This was a cunning god. Although she was not powerful, she knew how to protect herself. The battle in the valley was about to end. Verges, the goddess of magic and death, did not intend to disturb them. She just came quietly and left quietly. But just before she disappeared, a ranger with the emblem of the goddess of the forest, Marikai, frowned and looked in the direction she left. The gods were not ignorant. In order to protect themselves, many gods quietly created some chosen ones. Wind Spear Hills. In a forest surrounded by mountains, the elite guards from the city of Moder were moving forward quickly. They approached under the cover of night until a hidden camp appeared in front of them. There were many undead in the vicinity, but they were all quietly taken care of by the rogues. Adele Isabella had also joined the battle. As a legendary class player, she had been blessed by Soren and gained special abilities that were no weaker than legendary class players. Target found. A cold male voice rang out. Target confirmed to be a high-ranking member of the dragon shaman cult. A revived undead dragon has been discovered south of the camp. There was a red dragon entrenched in the Wind Spear Hills. In the past, there had been red dragons that were older than old age. The members of the Dragon Witch cult had captured a red dragon and found the skeleton of a huge dragon. In order to revive as many Dracolics as possible, they would even transform white dragons. However, the success rate of the transformation was relatively low. Most of them would become low-level bone dragons. Dark Blade, prepare to move. Interrogate and assassinate those sorcerers. The High Priest commanded the operation this time, and Soren's figure also appeared in the rear, but he did not mean to make a move. The battle soon broke out. The elite rogues quietly sneaked in and assassinated the sentries outside. When the first batch of members of the Dragon Witch cult was assassinated, they finally reacted and alerted everyone in the camp. However, it was a little too late now. A large number of rogues quickly rushed into the camp. Unlike the other rogues, almost all of the rogues who served Soren had the potential to become battle thieves. At the same time, a group of elite arcane assassins cooperated with them. The giant's burly body was buffed by multiple divine spells. With a dull roar, the figure of the Dracolics rose into the air, but as soon as it flew up, it stiffened in the air. The figure of the divine priest Milan appeared, and with the help of many priests, she cast more than 10 divine spells. Compared to the past, the divine priest Milan had grown a lot. This little girl quickly matured and worked hard to take over the position of the high priest in the future. The second batch of successors trained by Soren had begun to step onto the stage. In the future, the high priest would follow him into the kingdom of God, and the divine priest Milan would take over the scepter of the church. It's almost over. Soren quietly watched the battle in front of him. When the enemies were almost wiped out, his figure also appeared on the battlefield. Divinity of Death. Soul Extraction. Soren waved his hand and pulled out a gray soul. After a little inspection, he could not help but say, "What a surprise." Originally, he was going to check how many members of the Dragon Witch cult were in the Wind Spear Hills so that he could kill them all in one go. However, he did not expect that Soren would accidentally find the trace of the god of Lich. This god was not very strong, but his whereabouts had always been very mysterious. For Soren, the god of Lich also had a trace of the divine power of death. Interesting. Interesting. Soren smiled and crushed the soul in front of him, then teleported back to the castle. My lord. About a quarter of an hour later, the figure of a rogue appeared outside the door. He knelt down on one knee and said, "The territory of the gnomes seems to have been breached by the undead. We found traces of Siric's followers." Siric? Soren frowned and murmured, "It seems that some things have been changed by me." Siric actually made a move on the gnome gods. He thought carefully and decided to put off the matter of Siric first. The god of Lich was currently in the southern part of the continent, and he was secretly colluding with Szasztyn. Soren was going to kill him. If he could kill the god of Lich, Soren could not only replenish the power of the divinity of death, but also obtain some special abilities in secret spells. After all, the fall of the god of mages was related to this guy. However, to be on the safe side, Soren still decided to let Gloria and Vivian go together. The god of Lich was not easy to die, and Soren wanted to make sure that they could completely destroy his phylactery. Gloria had become a demigod, and it was time to try actual combat with a god. In addition, at present, the fallen witch had returned to the city of Moder, and there was no problem with her in charge. Soren just wanted to let her study how to solve the plague spread by the undead. After all, she had obtained a little divinity of the goddess of plagues at that time. Chapter 1037. Bayphone County. It was close to the northern tower, but it was not the territory of the witches. It belonged to the church that served the Lady of Night. The Church of the Gods had many private lands in the material plane. After the end of the era of Queen Isabella, there were no more powerful empires in the material plane, and the church took the opportunity to gain some secular power. However, under the constraints of the gods, the church did not dare to steal too much power. They only controlled the range of a city, just like the harvest city controlled by the Church of the Goddess of Agriculture. Soren also dealt with it the same way. His church had great influence in Mordor City, but he did not have much secular power. Bayphone County was controlled by the church under the command of Lady of Night, but there was still a puppet baron nobleman on the surface. This noble himself was a believer of Lady of Night. This was a common method used by the gods to support the nobles who believed in them to become lords, to achieve the effect of secretly controlling and influencing them. At this time, near a cemetery in Bayphone County, a group of floating ghost fire was wandering. This was a very common phenomenon, because after death god Nero's scheme succeeded, the number of will-o'-the-wisps and ghosts increased exponentially. Now, the nobles did not dare to bury their corpses near their original graves, and many large-scale graveyards were dangerous even during the day. This ghost fire seemed to be irregular, but if one looked carefully, they could find that they were controlled by some kind of power to monitor the surroundings. Near a large mausoleum in the south of the cemetery, a secret door suddenly opened, and then a lich came out. He carefully observed the surroundings, and then cast a teleportation spell to leave. Below the mausoleum, it was a very wide underground tomb. It was originally the tomb of an earl, but it was later transformed into an underground stronghold by the lich. The passages in all directions were more than 10 kilometers long, and there were fatal magic traps everywhere. Just the door was guarded by 2 ancient mummies, and then there were 2 coffins inside. Creatures full of evil were hidden in them. Damn it! An angry roar came from the bottom of the underground tomb. A pale golden skeleton holding a staff looked at the test bench in front of him and roared, "Damn the goddess of magic and death, Verges!" Golden skeletons. The lich, whose entire body was made of golden bones, indicated his identity. He was the lich god, Vishalan. Demigod-level lich liked to transform his body. After success, he would be immune to more than 85% of physical damage. The transformed form would be the golden skeleton in front of him. During the time of troubles, many demigod liches had turned into this form, and the lich god in front of him seemed to have just completed the transformation not long ago. Not long ago, the lich god, Visharan, was ambushed by the goddess of death and magic Verges. The powerful goddess of death and magic Verges killed the lich god on the spot. But, as a lich, Vishalan still had his phylactery. This gave him a chance to resurrect. After successfully resurrecting, the god of lich would be extremely weak, so he had no choice but to hide and avoid enemies. For some reason, he hid here and tried to repair the phylactery. However, Verges, who was in charge of death, was not easy to deal with. The phylactery of the god of lich was severely damaged, and even his body had to be rebuilt. The golden skeleton was only at the level of a demigod. This golden skeleton was much weaker than his previous body. On the test bench in front of him, a strange metal box was suspended in the air, and it was full of cracks. This was the wound left by Verges, the goddess of death and magic. The divine power of death damaged the phylactery of the god of lich. The god of lich tried to repair the phylactery, but the avatar crisis limited his power, so several attempts ended in failure. No one knew when. The sky became dark. A thin and slender figure appeared near this cemetery, as if some kind of power shrouded this place, and all the will-o'-the-wisp stayed in place. Two little girls, one in black and one in white, wearing exquisite princess dresses appeared on the left. They looked happy and seemed to be playing some fun game. Occasionally, they would get together and whisper a few words, as if they were plotting something interesting. On the other side, a beautiful witch quietly appeared. 36 golden tarot cards floated around her body. The scepter of Savras emitted a strange light, blocking all sensing and prophecy spells. She walked in the gloomy place, as if waiting for someone's order. Let's do it. Soren's figure turned into a stream of light and disappeared. Then Vivian and Lillian sped up, and Gloria launched Time Stop. Brother. The sword of destruction appeared in Vivian's palm, and Lillian reached out and grabbed the flame whip from the void. The two little girls said at the same time, "Leave the things outside to us." The abnormal energy suddenly alarmed the ancient mummy guarding the door. Soren nodded and walked past the two creatures. Then when he passed the coffin, suddenly two black shadows rushed out. The pale and rotten ancient vampires appeared and screamed at Soren. Divine shock wave. Soren did not pay attention to these enemies. After a divine shock wave forced them back, he quickly moved forward. These enemies were dealt with by Vivian, Lillian, and Gloria. His goal was the god of Lich. The other party had sensed Soren's arrival and tried to escape, but the nearby space had been blocked. In the deepest part of the underground tomb, Soren's figure slowly appeared. At the moment he appeared, overwhelming spells fell. There were at least 5 legendary spells among the dozens of spells. In an instant, Soren's figure was drowned and then disappeared. No. The vigilant god of Lich immediately noticed the abnormality and quickly retreated. But it was too late. Another figure of Soren appeared, and the silver-white stream of light turned into a storm and slashed at him. It was Soren's simulacrum that had just entered the door. The god of Lich's carefully prepared round of attack was powerful. In an instant, the simulacrum, which had 60% of Soren's strength, was destroyed. It's useless. Soren approached expressionlessly. Shadow Realm. Death Realm. Slaughter Realm. The realm close to the great divine power sealed the space. Soren quickly approached and then turned into a golden giant. God's descent. He did not give the god of Lich any chance at all because the other party also had a part of the divine power of death. He also had the divine powers of immortality, liches, necromancers, and necromancers. This was not an opponent that could be underestimated. The god of Lich may not be powerful, but the domains that he had mastered were also very deadly, including death, evil, magic, and immortality. No! A desperate scream sounded. Soren's attack destroyed the body of the god of Lich in an instant. The difference between minor divine power and intermediate divine power was so huge. After losing the initial opportunity, the god of Lich could not resist at all under Soren's storm-like attacks. His physical body was destroyed. Then a golden soul appeared and instantly turned into a stream of light, ready to escape. Death Prison. Soren knew that it was easy to destroy the body of the god of Lich, but it was difficult to kill him. He used the divine power of death to seal the other party's soul, and then connected to the target's phylactery in an instant. With a surge of divine power, Soren directly launched the ability of divinity to destroy the other party's phylactery. Crack. The sound of something breaking was heard. The next moment, a row of data appeared in front of him: killed god of Lich, Vishalan. Extracting soul energy from the target. You've gained 3650,000 slaughter EXP. Target has divinity. Extracting divinity from the target. You've gained 15 divinity. Target has divinity. Extracting divinity from the target. You've gained 12 divinity. Seize part of the target's divine power. Immortality, divine power extraction. Compatibility 55%. Part of the ability devoured and transformed into death, divine power. Lich, divine power extraction. Compatibility 25%. Part of the ability devoured and transformed into death, divine power. Necromancer, divine power extraction. Compatibility 15%. Part of the ability devoured and transformed into death, divine power. Mage, divine power extraction. Compatibility 75%. You've gained the domain of Mage. Necromancer, divine power extraction. Compatibility 45%. Your domain of Mage has been strengthened. Your domain of Death has been strengthened. Devour, domain of Magic. Your domain of Death has been upgraded. Divinity ability, Death Sense, has been activated. From now on, you can use the ability to sense certain places where death has occurred. This divinity ability allows you to sense any death that has occurred in the target within 3 weeks. The golden light of divinity fused into Soren's body. But at the same time, a part of the divinity was rejected by Soren and flew towards the nearest target with the ability to fuse. A small part of the divinity fused into Vivian and Lillian's body, and a large part of it flew towards Gloria. As a pure northern witch, Gloria automatically absorbed part of the divinity and divine power that the god of Lich took from the god of mages. At the same time, Gloria obtained part of the divine power of Mage, and the domain of Magic, on top of her original abilities. The battle ended quickly. Because this was the territory of the Lady of Night's church, Soren did not dare to stay any longer. After killing the god of Lich, he immediately left with the others. But not long after Soren's figure left, an elegant woman wearing a gorgeous robe appeared. She frowned as she looked at the target in front of her and murmured, "Someone beat us to it?" Who? Chapter 1038. Who is it? The goddess of magic and death, Verges, strolled in the gloomy graveyard. At this moment, her brows were furrowed and she seemed a little unhappy. The god of liches had always been her target. For this reason, the goddess of magic and death, Verges, even killed the god of liches once. However, because the other party had a phylactery, she at least damaged the phylactery in the end, reducing the other party's chances of resurrection. Since then, the whereabouts of the god of liches had become strange. There were almost no traces of him, and it took her a lot of effort to find him. However, just before she arrived, the god of liches had already been killed. Looking at the traces left behind, it was at most half an hour ago. The goddess of magic and death, Verges, used the power of the divinity of death, trying to find traces of the first target. However, she actually couldn't see anything. She could only vaguely feel 2 shadows, one black and one white. The other party is also a god. The goddess of magic and death, Verges, murmured, and at least in existence with mid-level divine power. Otherwise, it would be impossible to interfere with my death perception. Then, another beautiful female figure appeared. She continued, "There's someone else? A female mortal? No. It should be a demigod." The underground tomb had been completely destroyed. Verges found the bodies of 2 ancient mummies at the entrance. Without a doubt, their souls had been imprisoned and extracted. There were also vampires that had turned into ashes beside them. These should be the servants controlled by the god of liches. This god was very timid. Although Vishalan was the god of liches, he was very wary of liches. He was afraid that his divine power would be stolen by his own kind, so there were very few liches around him as servants. Most of the valuable things in the underground tomb had been looted clean. The person who took the lead should be a veteran. Even some of the test benches were directly emptied. The goddess of magic and death, Verges, finally came to the deepest part. She found traces of a battle. Other than the initial attack, it was almost a one-sided suppression. 2 mid-level divine powers gods. Verges fell into deep thought and muttered to herself, "I think I know who it is." 2 mid-level divine powers gods appeared at the same time, and they were one step ahead. Seems like only that deity with the ability of death and tracking can do that. Soren's identity was obvious. It was easy to find Soren, who held the divine title of tracking, because Verges believed that other than Soren, there were few gods who could beat her to it. A little noise came from outside. Verges frowned slightly and sensed for a moment before saying softly, "It seems to be a disciple of Lady Night." "Forget it, let's leave this place first." As a deity from another world, she did not want to interact with the Lady of the Night. This ancient goddess had a bad temper, and she was not friendly to the gods of the other world. In fact, most of the great divine powers were not very friendly to the gods of the other world. They thought that the gods of the other world were snatching their territory. For the gods with great divine power, the material plane was their territory. Mordor City. After returning from killing the Lich God, Soren was in a good mood. After a preliminary inventory of the spoils, he held Gloria in his arms and celebrated happily in the room. Even gods needed to relax once in a while. Although the Lich God, Visheren, was only a minor divine power, as a two-sided fence-sitter, he really had a lot of good things on him. At first, Visheren was a mortal. Later, he was promoted to a god by the Lord of Storms. In order to escape the oppression of the Lord of Storms, this guy turned to the goddess of magic and thus became a god of the god of mages. As a result, this guy was not satisfied. He secretly reconciled with the Lord of Storms and secretly expressed goodwill to Lady of the Night. He took advantage of this to strengthen himself. At first glance, he was a typical fence-sitter. However, this fence-sitter was a big winner in the Avatar crisis. After the goddess of magic had an accident, he immediately betrayed and plotted against the god of mages. At the same time, he seized part of his priesthood and divine power. If he had not been killed by Verges, the goddess of magic and death, and finally died in the hands of Soren, the Lich God would have quickly mastered the priesthood of mage, and directly promoted to a lesser divine power. It might even have been promoted all the way to an intermediate divine power. It is necessary to mention the priesthood and domain of the fallen god of mages, Azuz. His priesthood was wizard, mage, and spellcaster in the general sense. His domain was illusion, knowledge, magic, order, and spells. Azuz was once the first preaching mage and the most powerful mortal mage at that time. He defeated the god of prophecy, Savras, and imprisoned him in the scepter. Now, the scepter was in the hands of Gloria. It was obvious that the Lich God, Visheren, and the god of mages, Azuz, had a lot of compatible abilities. The first was the priesthood of wizard and mage. The Lich God mastered the necromancer, which was only one of the professions of mage. Then there were illusions, knowledge, magic, and spells. These were all powers that the Lich God could absorb. Unfortunately, this guy's talent was not very good. Until now, he had only fused with the domain of magic. Soren found the weapon of the god of mages in the Lich God's treasure vault. It was a grade 3 artifact, the Old Staff. It had a very simple name, but the power of the god of mages was sealed. It included wizard, mage, illusion, knowledge, and spells. It seemed that the Lich God learned very quickly. He even learned the method that the god of mages used to deal with the god of prophecy. It really felt like an eye for an eye. The soul of the god of mages had already been scattered. The old staff itself was not a very powerful artifact. Its most important role was to help the god of mages repair the magic net. There were remnants of Azutha's soul fragments in it, and Soren could absorb mage and knowledge. As for the other abilities, Soren already had enough domains. So he was prepared to give it to Gloria and the Fallen Witch to see what they could gain from it. Gloria currently had the abilities of prophecy, wizard, knowledge, and so on. If she could gain the power of spells and illusion, then she would very likely replace Azuz and become the new god of mages. This was a very good idea. According to Soren's judgment, there would be a battle between the goddess of magic, the Lady of Silvermoon, and the Lady of Night. It was hard to say who would win in the end. If something happened to the goddess of magic, then Gloria might have a chance to replace her after becoming the god of mages. The weave was very important in Soren's future plans. If Gloria could control the power of the weave, then not only would she be of great help to Soren, but she could also help him limit the abuse of the weave by mortals. If Soren wanted to become a greater divine power, there were many things that he needed to rely on the weave. Night fell. Gloria, with a satisfied expression, went to the arcane tower to study a new staff, while Soren prepared to deal with Naruto and Sirik. Just as the night was getting darker, a tall and plump figure appeared outside the door. The fallen witch stood at the door and hesitated for a moment. Then she pushed the door open and entered Soren's room. "Is it time?" Soren glanced at her and raised his eyebrows. The fallen witch nodded gently and then said, "I already have some clues about the plague of the undead. Give me some more time and I should be able to solve it." Soren nodded and then said, "Maybe you should try the realm of the gods. The Avatar crisis has broken out. This is the best time, and the worst time. If you miss this opportunity, even in the future, I won't be able to help you easily become a god. In the future, Gloria and I will both go to the kingdom of God. I think you don't want to stay alone in the material plane. Since you already have the divinity of the goddess of pestilence, you should try to explore the realm of the gods further." The fallen witch fell into deep thought and then said, "I will try. Becoming a god. This kind of thing was really a bit far away for mortals. If it wasn't for the Avatar crisis, it might not be possible to succeed in thousands of years. Let's begin." Soren put down the book in his hand and waved his hand. The space around them was sealed. The fallen witch's face was flushed, and she walked to Soren meekly. Then she slowly knelt down, like a little bitch. "It seems that I have to find a way to solve the problem on your body." Soren's expression was a little subtle, but he still said in a deep voice, "I have all the influence in the abyss. If possible, I will find a way to help you remove the mark on your body. The trace of the Queen of Succubus." Soren had been a little aware of it, but this demon lord was not easy to deal with. Her combat power might not be strong, but her ability was very strange, almost reaching the extreme of a certain field. This kind of extreme conversion of aura, even Soren might not be able to resist. Especially when he was only in the form of a saint. It must be known that the previous generation's Lady of Wealth ventured into the abyss in the form of a saint to sneak back to the kingdom of God. She was imprisoned by the original Six-Fingered, and as a result, she was humiliated for many years. This was a very embarrassing thing. Because even the powerful gods might not be able to defeat the demon lord in the form of a saint. Of course. If he was in the form of a god, there would be no fear. Basically, there were no natural enemies in the form of a god, unless there was a problem inside the kingdom of God. Pa! A crisp sound reverberated in the air, accompanied by the faint sound of a woman's moaning. Soren faithfully completed the contract ceremony to please the Queen of Succubus, but his mind had turned to the abyss. After stealing a large number of souls from the Styx, both the demon lord and the kingdom of God had greatly increased in strength. He was considering whether it was time to expand and separate a layer of the abyss. At that time, his demon lord would be the real, abyss overlord. Chapter 1039. The Land of Silver. Inside a majestic temple, a strange magical energy shrouded the place. Because there was a huge silver mine nearby, this territory had always been quite rich. It was located in a mountainous area, a bit like Chengdu Prefecture in Soren's previous life, which was surrounded by mountains. Therefore, even the undead calamity didn't cause too much of an impact. On the other hand, this place belonged to the Lady of Silvermoon. Perhaps because it was close to the territory of the forest elves, the women in the Land of Silver were all beautiful, fair-skinned, and fierce-tempered. In the Land of Silver, women's status was almost equal to men's, and they could even be city officials and so on. This was relatively rare in the south. This environment was conducive to the Lady of Silvermoon's faith, and she was especially popular among matriarchal women. At this moment, two women were seated within the shrine. One of them was tall and slender with long, flowing black hair. She was Mistra, the current goddess of magic. The other had long silver hair, emerald green eyes, delicate facial features, and slender legs. This was one of the incarnations of the Lady of Silvermoon. This goddess had many incarnations. Sometimes, her incarnation was a ghostly young girl with black hair and pupils, wearing a transparent moonlight robe. Sometimes, her incarnation was a dignified and gentle noble woman. Soren's incarnation would also be bright or dim according to the cycle of the moon. This change in appearance didn't affect her actual power. Soren knew that her sister was very happy to destroy her incarnations to weaken herself, so she rarely sent her incarnations to the material plane. She often sent her incarnations to various outer realms to search for all kinds of magic and weapons, hoping to destroy the Lady of the Night forever. Azuz has completely fallen. The goddess of magic stood up, closed her eyes, and whispered, "Just now, I felt a powerful force erase Azuz's soul imprint. Part of the mage divinity was transferred to me, but most of it was taken by someone else." The god of mages was a subordinate of the goddess of magic and spent most of his time helping her repair the magic net. The god of lich didn't completely kill Azuz, but imprisoned him in the scepter. Soren didn't have much affection for this god, so to avoid trouble, he directly erased Azuz's soul consciousness. Lady Silvermoon's expression was grave as she muttered, "Really? It seems that our strength has weakened again. This must be Shar's scheme. The lich god has long since joined her." Suluan hated his sister very much. These two goddesses had been fighting ever since they were born, but until now, there had been no clear winner. There are also traces of Naruto's involvement in this matter. The goddess of magic took a few steps and said slowly, "My power is recovering. After taking back part of the mage priesthood, I should be able to recover 70% of my former power. However, due to my disappearance, many evil faction wizards have joined Lady Night's side. This is not conducive to our plan." Lady Silvermoon frowned. After a while, she said, "The moonlight is dim. The Avatar crisis has affected my power. Only by next year's full moon will I be able to regain my full strength. Maybe we should postpone our plan for now. Char has been involved in Naruto's conspiracy. The gods certainly won't sit back and watch Naruto advance to a greater divine power. When Naruto is ready to extract the power of death from this world to advance, the other gods will certainly not be able to resist taking action. At that time, maybe we can find an opportunity." The failure to kill Clemvox meant that Naruto's plot was not completely successful. However, he had another plan. Now that the realm of eternal rest in the material plane was destroyed, the power of death became more and more intense. When the time was right, Naruto would inevitably absorb the power of death from the whole world and then use this as an opportunity to directly advance to a greater divine power. This was a very huge force. The more creatures died in the material plane, the more intense the power of death gathered. If Naruto succeeded in the integration, he would certainly advance. Yes. The goddess of magic nodded. The others certainly won't sit back and watch. At that time, Clemvox will also appear, or he will never have another chance. And I sense that Sirik has come out. With his ambition and madness, he will never allow Naruto to become a greater divine power. At that time, the gods will be involved in the dispute. The Lady of Silvermoon thought for a moment and then said, "Right. What do you think of the one in the outer islands?" Hearing the Lady of Silvermoon's words, the goddess of magic's face could not help but blush slightly, and then she said as if nothing had happened, "Him? Without a doubt, he is favored by fate. Very powerful. Also very cold. He is the son of slaughter. In the face of Naruto's advancement, he certainly can't sit still and wait for death. At that time, he will definitely make a move." The Lady of Silvermoon nodded in agreement and said slowly, "The Dread Lord has completely fallen. The little girl with him should also be a mid-level divine power. In that case, he will be a very powerful helper. However, he seems to be deviating towards evil even more seriously. And I feel the breath of the abyss on him." Both goddesses were in the good camp. They could not completely trust Soren, even the goddess of magic. Otherwise, she would not be hiding at the Lady of Silvermoon's place, but would have asked Soren for help. Hasn't the goddess of the forest, Meilikai, made a move yet? The Lady of Silvermoon suddenly asked. The goddess of magic shook her head and said, "Not yet. Melikai is more patient than before. I don't know what she is preparing. Since the fall of the oak tree father, the natural divine system has rarely intervened in worldly battles, and Loshanda has become the current Lord of Light." The Lady of Silvermoon hesitated and said, "What do you think of Loshanda now?" Hearing the other party's words, the goddess of magic showed a rare trace of fear and whispered, "He is very scary now. I feel that he is no longer the light of dawn of the past. His ideas are becoming more and more paranoid, as if he is ready to purify everything with the glory of mountain paradise. I am worried that when he starts to act, it will be another outbreak of the calamity of dawn." The Lord of Light's past was not easy to evaluate. When he was still the light of dawn, he had already brought disaster to the gods because of his overly persistent beliefs. So, the gods were now a little afraid of him. Even the gods of the good alignment were the same, and even the goddess of agriculture kept an appropriate distance from her father. Perhaps the only ones who really followed him were those stubborn paladins and fanatics. In the past, there was still Mother Earth to influence him, but now the Lord of Light had completely become the Lord of Light. The self-sacrifice of the oak tree father had changed him a lot. Sigh. The Lady of Silvermoon sighed and said, "If only the oak tree father was still here. If he was here, the calamity of the undead would definitely not break out, and the oak tree father would directly purify and maintain the balance of nature." The oak tree father was a hardline god. He didn't even have a camp. His camp was nature. Whether good or evil, as long as the balance of nature was destroyed, it was his enemy. The most powerful natural divine system had become a thing of the past. Although there were many gods in the human divine system, they had been divided. Even the god of war had become very cautious, so no one had stopped Naruto's conspiracy until now. No one wanted to be the first to take the lead. Mordor City. Soren, who was evaluated by the two goddesses, also seemed to have a premonition of Naruto's plan, because the rich power of death had increased his divine power. The energy core of Mies had been placed in the arcane tower. Within the range of the arcane tower, the high-grade witches of Mordor City could enjoy this convenience. They could make magic tools more easily. However, the effect of this kind of improvement was not obvious in a short time. It often took time for a qualitative change to occur. But now the arcane shop in Mordor City had begun to sell magic equipment. Just when Soren's attention was focused on the bottomless abyss, he felt a kind of call in the dark, and then he shifted his attention to the Eastern Kingdom. In a barren desert, a girl named Cicada was walking alone in the desert. She had completed the training of the Lost Trace sect and truly mastered the mystery of Shadow Trace. Suddenly, the legendary realm made her spirit sublimated, and even Soren felt it. Her talent is really good. Soren closed his eyes and looked at the girl in front of him with his spirit, and said to himself, "It seems that we can get ready to act. A monk order. This should be able to strengthen the church." Soren had already prepared to form a monk order. There were too many wanderers in the church, and it was too simple. The monks of the Eastern Kingdom had all kinds of powerful and mysterious powers. With the girl, Cicada, as an opportunity, Soren was ready to attract some monks to join the church. Maybe it's time to give her an oracle, Soren thought. The wind was howling. The girl walking alone in the desert stopped, and in front of her, a demon wearing a bamboo hat appeared. Since the appearance of the ancient evil, the Eastern Kingdom had also suffered turmoil. Demons and undead were only one of them. The demon that had not been seen for a long time began to appear frequently. The demon was also called the demon beast ghost. It was said that it was a creature that appeared with the desert gods. The most dangerous one was the demon lord, who was a terrible enemy in the Eastern Kingdom. These creatures were immune to 1 to 6 spells, and enchanted weapons below +2 were almost difficult for mortals to defeat. At present, the Eastern Princess was busy dealing with the demon lord. She could not even take care of her own territory. Piercing shock palm. This was not the first demon that Cicada had encountered. At the moment when she found the enemy, she sped up and rushed directly. Penetration. The special ability of the Lost Trace sect made Cicada's figure like a ghost. Although her palm was blocked by the enemy, the next moment, the demon spat out a mouthful of blood. Sun Flame form. The fist master who succeeded in one move followed up with another attack. With a loud bang, the demon in front of him was directly hit and flew out. At this time, the enemy had time to say a sentence: Transcendence? Chapter 1040. There were two types of monks. One was the normal monk, and the other was the legendary monk. Divine Transcendence was a terrifying ability to enhance a monk's strength. Monks who had broken through to this realm were no longer considered mortals. Ordinary weapons could no longer harm them, and on top of this, legendary monks could also obtain additional damage reduction. In the Eastern countries, monks were actually very popular among women. However, there were still very few women who could become monks. At most, they could only become dancers. The reason was that monks had the special ability of ageless body. This was the key reason why they were far more superior than warriors. As mentioned before, warriors were very strong in the early stage and much stronger than monks in the middle stage. However, once they reached middle age, their power would decrease rapidly. This was the aging of the body. Mortals could not resist it. However, monks were different from warriors. Monks had the ability to adjust their bodies. After reaching level 17, they could stop all the aging process and stabilize themselves at the current stage. In other words, monks would not age until they died, and their power would not decrease rapidly like warriors. Under normal circumstances, monks with ageless body would only age rapidly at the moment of death. This was the reason why women wanted to become monks. To them, it was to keep their appearance forever. Generally, female monks in the East would maintain the appearance of a middle-aged woman as long as they survived. Some of the more talented ones would forever maintain the appearance of a 20-year-old woman. For example, Cicada in front of him would never continue to age. Clang! In the second round, Cicada used Luo Sha Demon's weapon empty-handed. She only had a thin silk glove on her hand. This was a treasure given by the White Cloud sect. It could withstand +5 magical weapons with her bare hands. Without this equipment, Cicada's ability would at most be able to resist a +3 weapon. Bang, bang, bang. A fierce whip kick came like a shadow. Cicada's attack speed was shockingly fast. After dodging the enemy's attack, she attacked more than 10 times in an instant. Luo Sha Demon retreated. Although he blocked most of the attacks, he still kept spitting out blood. This was the hidden energy technique. Monks from the East could directly penetrate most defensive effects. To them, enemies wearing heavy armor could also be easily defeated. Bang! Cicada's figure retreated after a series of attacks. Then, it took a deep breath and suddenly punched at the Luo Sha Demon in front of it from a distance of about 30 feet. Boom! Luo Sha Yao's figure flew out, his chest clearly caved in, and a clear fist imprint appeared. External release of chi force? Soren's eyes widened as he muttered, "I didn't expect this little girl to be so talented." There were 3 stages to a monk's Ki. The first stage was the hidden force, which could break through the enemy's defense. The most commonly used move was the penetrating force. The second stage was to attach chi to the body. The more common abilities were the ethereal body and the penetrating shock palm. The third stage was the release of chi. The sun flame style and the hollow bright fist that Chan had just used belonged to this category. If it was in the East, it would be called 100 Steps Divine Fist. This was a move that could attack the enemy from a distance. It was a huge threat to spellcasters. The scariest people who used this ability were the Cloud Monks. They had lived much longer than others, and the chi in their body was unbelievably strong. Cicada's punch shattered the Luo Sha Yao's heart. After killing the enemy, she rested for a while and then went to clean up the battlefield. Soren watched all of this silently. However, he was thinking in his mind. He said to himself, "It is indeed necessary to train a group of monks. The disadvantages of rogues are not obvious at the moment. But after more than 10 years, these rogues will be older, and their flexibility will not be as good as now. My church only has priests in the spellcasting department. Although there are half-elves in the melee department, they also need to be replenished. Rogues and warriors were the same. As long as the race was human, after the age of 45, if they had not broken through the realm of legends, their strength would rapidly decline. Although their experience would become rich, their overall attributes would decrease. Half-elves were slightly better. They could probably maintain their peak state until about 65 years old. The advantage of monks was that after entering the higher level, they could maintain their peak state even after 100 years. This was very useful for a church. As long as a group of monks was trained, according to the lifespan of humans and the generally long lifespan of monks, even if they did not replenish new blood, they could probably last for about 120 years. This was quite a long time even for a deity. Since he had an idea, he was naturally ready to act. Soren immediately found the high priest and said, "I am going to set up a group of monks. The preliminary candidates have been decided. You can prepare in the church." Cicada had entered the realm of legends. It was enough for her to be the leader of the group of monks. The Eastern Kingdom did not lack monks, but Soren needed monks from the evil camp. This required him to secretly help Cicada recruit people. Just right. Soren's avatar was also ready to go to the Eastern Kingdom to see what was going on there. Because the distance was too far, there were a lot of scattered news. Most of it was related to ancient evils and Luo Xiao, but Soren could not see it clearly. In the desert, Cicada quickly collected the spoils of war from the Luo Xiao. She did not make a vow of poverty, so now she was somewhat valuable. The feeling of being spied on disappeared. Since entering the realm of legends, her senses had become stronger and stronger. Especially the sensing ability brought by meditation, she could vaguely sense Soren's existence. The girl moved forward very quickly. About an hour later, a broken city wall appeared in front of her. This was an abandoned town. It used to be an oasis with a population of about 5,000. However, after the outbreak of the turmoil last year, the oasis had been covered by the desert. The wind and sand had destroyed everything here. Now it was a place occupied by Luo Xiao. In order to fight against the frequent evils, most of the high-level monks had their own missions. Cicada's mission was to clean up the Luo Xiao here. Dismal Wind Valley. An ancient battlefield that had existed for hundreds of years. The overly tragic war had caused ghosts to surround this land. Now it had become a paradise for the undead. "My lord." A figure holding a huge scythe entered and then went through an underground passage to an underground temple. This undead that looked like an attendant of death knelt down on one knee and said, "The god of liches has fallen. The members of the dragon witch cult and the dragon cultists have been defeated, but the dragon liches they resurrected are enough to start our plan." A pitch-black skull appeared, and Naruto's voice sounded on the altar. "Who killed the god of liches?" The attendant of death said respectfully, "The Shadow Master, Soren." Naruto hesitated and said slowly, "It's him again?" The attendant of death nodded and said, "Should we start the ceremony according to the original plan? The power of death has spread throughout the entire material plane. The 12 altars on the main road are ready." Naruto fell into deep thought and said, "Let's do it according to the plan." However, the Shadow Master, Soren, is a problem. He inherited the power of the 3 death gods, so he's a potential enemy for me. There's nothing to be afraid of if he's alone, but I don't know where Clemvox is hiding. If they're secretly working together, it'll be troublesome. The attendant of death suddenly said, "My lord. Aren't we still controlling the unkillable king, Orcus? Although this undead king isn't strong enough after being resurrected, he still controls a large number of demons in the abyss. Before the ceremony starts, we can send Orcus to attack the outer islands. This will definitely hold him back, and we can deal with the Shadow Master after he becomes a greater god." The former great lord of the abyss had fallen several times. Although he was successfully resurrected one after another, Orcus's strength was decreasing every time he was resurrected. The chaos was getting deeper and deeper into his soul. In this undead calamity, Orcus, who was resurrected by the undead lords, was almost completely turned into a puppet under their control. Let Orcus attack the outer islands? Naruto fell into deep thought and said slowly, if we do that, we'll be enemies with the Shadow Master in the future. Yes. Let's do that. As long as I become a greater god and master the Death God system, the Shadow Master will be an enemy that needs to be eradicated sooner or later. Let Orcus summon the undead army. Before the ceremony starts, I want to see the demon army attack the city of Mordor. A meaningful smile appeared at the corner of the Death God's attendant's mouth, and he replied, yes. Master. The brilliance on the altar gradually dissipated. As Naruto's figure disappeared, the attendant of death in front of him quickly retreated. However, just as his figure left the temple, a faint divine brilliance emerged from his body and turned into a beautiful woman with black hair and disappeared with a chuckle. The attendant of death's eyes flickered a little. He stood in place for a while before he began to carry out his master's arrangement. In order to perfectly hold the ceremony to promote to a greater god, my lord Naruto was going to launch an attack on the outer islands and secretly control the undead king, Orcus's abyss army to attack the city of Mordor. This would distract the attention of the Shadow Master and weaken the enemy's strength in the material plane. Although it was dangerous to completely anger the Shadow Master at this moment, since it was his master's order, he could only carry it out. Chapter 1041. The Boat of the Desert. In the flying yellow sand, a group of women in bamboo hats moved forward quickly. These women had tall and graceful figures. Although they were covered with thick clothes, they still could not hide their beauty. This was a group of high-grade Oriental dancers. There were many gadgets in their seemingly cumbersome dresses, including poisons, hidden weapons, daggers, casting materials, and so on. There was even a hidden button under the skirt on the back of some Oriental dancers. As long as it was gently untied, they could remove the obstacle and sit on a man's lap to enjoy the pleasure of sex without leaving a trace. They were the minions of the Eastern Empress. Although their means were vicious and they controlled many gray areas, they still did some things like adopting orphans and helping the poor. Everything was relative. Human beings were a very complicated race. It was difficult to have pure good or evil people. The Oriental dancers were between good and evil. They were led by the Empress to fight for women's power. The desert country was formerly controlled by the Muhammad divine system. Under the influence of this divine system, the status of women inside was extremely low. There was even a matter of cutting off the female emperor, homonym. Later, this divine system was expelled, and the profession of the Oriental dancer was born in the turmoil, and quickly controlled the gray area of the desert country. The Eastern Empress herself was an ambitious figure. She was worshipped by many women, and her origin was unknown. It was said that she was a rebel against the desert divine system. The most dazzling and eye-catching in the crowd was the Eastern Empress. However, at the moment, she did not look as graceful and elegant as before. Although she was still beautiful, a trace of fatigue and worry appeared on her face. In any case, the Eastern Empress was still a mortal. As a mortal, she had her own limitations. Although she had a large number of assassins and dancers under her command, she could only barely protect herself in the turbulent year of the Holy Sage. Especially after the appearance of creatures such as ancient evil things, ancient mummies, Furlan magic sunflower, and Luo Sha demon, the sphere of influence of the Eastern Empress gradually shrank. Many secretly controlled towns were forced to give up, and people migrated to the southern area of the Eastern Kingdom. Empress. The figure of the Fist Master, D, appeared. She returned through the desert like a gust of wind and came to the front of the dance group. The front has been occupied by the Luo Sha demon monarch. They seem to be controlled by an ancient evil creature, and I see a lot of twisted aberrations ahead. The Eastern Empress's expression was extremely solemn. She nodded and said to the middle-aged dancer beside her, "Have the other members of the martial monk cult arrived?" "He's almost here," the middle-aged dancer said. "That legendary existence should be coming as well." The Eastern Crown Princess's expression relaxed a lot when she heard this. She said slowly, "Is that so? Looks like we have a much higher chance of winning this battle." Behind the Eastern Empress, there was an army composed of professionals, including the Oriental dancer, the assassin, the ranger, the puppet master, the 3 factions of monks, as well as the White Cloud sect and the legendary monks who were waiting for their arrival. Such a powerful lineup was enough to fight against many deities. However, even against such a powerful team, the Eastern Empress didn't have a high chance of winning. This was because they were facing an ancient evil being. Furthermore, it was one of the most terrifying ancient evils. Its name was Zargan. Ruler of hell, the wind howled. The thick smell of blood filled the air. The believers of these ancient evils destroyed 3 cities and captured a large number of mortals for blood sacrifice. They were worshipping a terrifying horn. This horn was the main body of the ancient evils, or a terrifying existence that had died. The terminator of all things, the ancient elemental eye, the god of darkness, the patient, the waiting, the cursed, the father of the ancient evils, the source of all evil, the embodiment of the eternal darkness, the devourer of all worlds, the scorner, and the destroyer. A strange chant echoed in the air. Some kind of evil aura halo shrouded the town filled with blood in front of them. Even the Eastern Empress was a little shaken for a while. This was the unique ability of the ancient evils. Often, the appearance of an ancient evils would be accompanied by a vision, and it might even change the climate of the entire world. What exactly is Zargan? A young-looking ranger asked. Why haven't I heard a word about it? The monk next to him was silent. After a while, a male monk who looked like a legendary fist master said, Zargan is one of the oldest ancient evils sealed in the Eastern Kingdom. Before Asmodeus, Zargan was the ruler of hell. He was the leader of the ancient Bartholomew. When Asmodeus and his companions attacked hell, Zargan and Asmodeus fought a great battle. Asmodeus tore Zargan's flesh into pieces, but he couldn't destroy Zargan's horn. In the end, he threw Zargan's horn into the deep underground of a world in the main material plane. Around the horn, Zargan's flesh gradually recovered. On the ground above him, a country called Synodicia gradually flourished. But in the end, this country went into decline. A group of believers who saw Zargan as their true god invaded and finally destroyed this country. When a barbarian named Zankar led his army to attack the capital controlled by the ancient evils, he finally found the true face of the god he believed in, a ferocious and violent beast. In order to save his people, the barbarian and Zargan fought fiercely. After 7 days and 7 nights of fighting, although Zankar was the strongest and fiercest warrior, he still lost in the end. Every time he hurt Zargan a little, Zargan's injury would immediately heal in a moment. Zankar, who had exhausted all his strength, finally fell under the attack of the ancient evils. The gods blessed Zankar, hoping that he could defeat the ancient evils, but they were disappointed in the end. So the gods decided to do it themselves. With a mocking smile, Zargan killed some of the gods and drove the other gods back to their countries. Maybe the death and defeat of the gods didn't matter to Asmodeus, but he knew that Zargan was a threat to him. So at the last moment of the battle, Asmodeus finally did it himself. Asmodeus finally defeated Zargan again, but he knew that he couldn't kill him. So Asmodeus bound Zargan's horn in a solid boulder and buried it deep in the ground. The area where the horn was buried was the center of the ancient empire of Amaska, which is where we are now. The Avatar crisis had loosened the ancient seal. Not only had the god of murder, Sirik, escaped, but some terrible ancient evils had also escaped from captivity. Hearing the words of the Master of Fist, many people could not help but swallow. Then someone said, since the enemy is so strong, even the gods can't defeat him. So, is it possible for us to reseal him? Of course, the Master of Fist said firmly. Zargan is still very weak. He has just broken the seal, and he hasn't even been fully resurrected. As long as we destroy his believers and the altar of his resurrection, he can be resealed. This terrible evil is an enemy we can't escape from. Once he is fully resurrected, the first thing he will do is to destroy and control the material plane, and then turn all living things into evil creatures. Finally, he will challenge Asmodeus of the Bator Inferno again. Zargan knew that he could not defeat the Lord of Hell, so the first thing he had to do was to build a huge army. This needed to devour a plain. People were still immersed in the legends of ancient times. Suddenly, some figures appeared in the distant sky, and then all the monks could not help but bow humbly. A middle-aged warrior monk of unknown age slowly descended from the clouds. He stepped in the air, as if there was an invisible substitute, and came to the oriental dancer step by step. Master. In the face of this legendary existence, even the Oriental Empress could not help but bow. The long life had made the cloud monk in front of her forget a lot. He even ignored the peerless beauty of the Oriental Empress. He just looked ahead and frowned. Is Zargan going to be resurrected? Let's do it. You deal with the evil followers outside, and I will go in and deal with Zargan's horn. Tell all those who are not legendary not to get close to the altar. The aura of the ancient evils can affect people's minds. They just need to deal with the monsters outside. The cloud monk's expression was neither sad nor happy. In his unknown life, it was not the first time that he fought against the ancient evils. He almost did not touch the ground, and he stepped into the town in front of him. Some Rakshasa demons and twisted evil creatures found his trace and rushed directly toward him. The cloud monk almost did not look at them, and he just hit the air with his palm. Boom! Suddenly, the earth shook, and a huge handprint of about 10 meters high appeared on the city wall in front of him. As for the Rakshasa demons who tried to attack the cloud monk, they had already become a pool of blurred flesh and blood on the wall. Is this the air-splitting palm? A boxing master was stunned and murmured, "It's so powerful. Grandmaster's aura is so powerful that it's incredible." The cloud monk went straight to the heart of the evil creatures. This legendary existence could shake the earth and mountains with just a wave of his hand. His casual attack was no less than the power of a god. Almost no cultist could stop him. To a certain extent, the gods walking in the mortal world were not as powerful as him. At least, they were far inferior when they were in the form of saints. Only when they mobilized their divine power to transform into the form of gods could the gods have the ability to move the earth and shake the mountains like this cloud monk. Even Soren was only an advanced legendary class in his normal state, and the cloud monk in front of him was probably infinitely close to or even beyond level 40. How powerful was a warrior monk who was close to level 40? In the historical records, only one warrior monk had reached such a height. Under the influence of the succubus queen, he finally defeated the demon prince, Demogorgon. Chapter 1042. The afterglow of the setting sun dyed the city of Mordor with a golden glow. It was rare for Soren to stand on the tower and enjoy a moment of peace. Looking back on his experience along the way, he was racing against time almost every moment. He had never enjoyed the extravagant life of this world. Now the Avatar crisis had entered the last stage. As long as he survived the last wave from hell, Soren could enjoy the comfortable time after becoming a god with his most important person. This was a very long time. Soren had enough time to squander extravagantly. 100 years, 200 years, 300 years, if it was not enough, he could spend 1,000 years, 2,000 years, or 3,000 years. As an immortal god, as long as Soren wanted, he could do whatever he wanted without hesitation. And all this could be obtained as long as he survived the Avatar crisis. At that time, the status of the gods would be stabilized, and they would no longer fall easily in the hands of others. Soft footsteps could be heard. Fallen Witch Karina's figure appeared. She was stunned when she saw Soren standing under the setting sun. Then she walked over to him and whispered, "It's rare to see you so leisurely." "Really?" Soren turned around and smiled. Then he looked into the distance and said, "Since the outbreak of the Avatar crisis, I have been racing against time. In the past, it was to protect Vivian, and later it was to deal with other crises. But fortunately, everything is coming to an end. I have a hunch that the energy storm is gradually weakening, and it may end by the end of next year at the latest. At that time, I will have enough time to arrange my future life." Fallen Witch was shocked when she heard this, and then she was a little disappointed. "Go to the kingdom of God?" That's true. Whether it's you or Vivian, you will eventually go to the kingdom of God. Soren turned around and looked at her. For a long time, Fallen Witch had proved her loyalty with her actions, and because of some rituals, the estrangement between her and Soren had gradually decreased, and their relationship had become intimate. Karina met Soren's gaze. Soren suddenly smiled and said slowly, "If you're willing, you can also enjoy immortality with us. Gloria is about to become a god. You also have divinity in your body. As long as we get rid of the succubus queen's imprint, it won't be difficult for me to help you become a god. But in the end, you still have to make the choice." The Fallen Witch walked the path of the arcane empire. Unlike Soren, her ultimate goal was to become a destiny wizard or a grand arcanist. If she chose to become a god, she would have to give up some things and become a guardian of the laws alongside Soren. The gods were incredibly powerful, but they also maintained the order of the world. It was like a job for them, and they didn't have as much freedom as the great arcanists. The power granted by the laws also came with obligations. The duty of these gods was to maintain the operation of the sun, moon, and stars, and to maintain the order of many rules. The multiverse itself was orderly. The gods were supposed to maintain everything, and it had been so since ancient times. Even in the face of the multiverse's greatest crisis, which was the earliest invasion of the demons, the gods never retreated even if some of them died. The Fallen Witch hesitated for a moment and then said, "I don't know. I've persisted for so long. Although it's hard to refuse to become a god. But..." Soren smiled and said, "Arcana isn't outside the path of the gods. In the future, my plan will also use arcana in many places. You can think about Gloria's current path. She may surprise you in the future." Gloria was also a witch, and she could become an arcanist at any time if she wanted to. But she chose to stand side by side with Soren, and eventually control arcana as a god. Night fell. Soren returned to his study. Suddenly, as if he had sensed something, his whole body trembled, and then he said to himself, "Is Cicada in danger?" Cicada had Soren's mark on her body. This mark was similar to an apostle, and it was also on the Saint Cardinal Milan's body. If she was in mortal danger, Soren would be able to sense it directly. The next moment, Soren's vision turned to the faraway Eastern Kingdom. At this moment, it was still dusk in the Eastern Kingdom, but what Soren saw was blood and corpses all over the ground. There were humans, monsters, and many twisted aberrations. There was also an aura that Soren didn't like. It was the aura of an ancient evil creature. The gods hated any ancient evil creatures, and rejected everything related to the abominations. A terrifying monster appeared in front of Soren's eyes. In front of him was a huge altar, and there were dark red blood sacrifices all over it. He didn't know how many people were sacrificed. Cicada's figure was on the side of the altar. There were already many corpses nearby. After eliminating the Rakshasas and evil creatures on the periphery, all the legendary professionals joined the battle against Zargan. Zargan had more than 10 terrifying tentacles, and Cicada was hit by one of them. Her defense was instantly broken, and her internal organs were almost shattered with one hit. "Am I going to die?" Blood flowed from the corner of Cicada's mouth, and her consciousness was a little blurry. Her expression showed a trace of sadness and unwillingness. It wasn't easy for her to reach the legendary level, but she didn't expect to die here. She didn't regret it, because sealing the ancient evil was the mission of the monks. For a long time, countless monks had stepped forward one after another, and it was unknown how many legendary powerhouses had fallen, but no one had ever regretted or retreated. This was their mission. From the moment they became monks, they knew that they might have to face all of this in the future. All the monasteries existed for this reason. For a long time, the entire Eastern Kingdom supported monks' monasteries, and when the ancient evil creatures appeared, they had to fulfill their mission to seal these terrifying monsters. Cicada didn't regret it, but she was a little unwilling. Her consciousness gradually blurred. Although her shattered internal organs didn't kill her instantly, it wouldn't be long before she died. His mind started to become muddled. Just as Cicada thought that he was about to enter the Netherworld River, a gentle male voice rang out. With injuries of this degree, as my chosen, it won't be that easy for you to die. A little golden light appeared. Cicada didn't know when, but a young man with an evil aura appeared in front of her. His body was shrouded in fog, but he exuded an indescribable pressure. No one knew when he appeared, and no one noticed his arrival, whether it was the cloud monk or the ancient evil creatures. Greater restoration. Soren's fingertips gently touched Cicada's forehead, and the next moment, Cicada's body recovered at a speed visible to the naked eye. The restoration spell cast by the gods was so powerful that Cicada had been completely restored in almost a breath. All the injuries had been healed, and she had almost returned to her peak state. Shadow Lord. Cicada recognized Soren at once, which made her involuntarily kneel down on one knee. This was an emotion that was hard to resist. An ancient evil creature? Soren turned his head to look at the monster in front of him, then frowned. Zargan? I didn't expect it to run out in the end. He had traveled to the Eastern Kingdom before. Naturally, he knew that Zargan was one of the most dangerous ancient evil creatures in the Eastern Kingdom. Zargan was a monster that was killed and sealed by the Lord of Hell, Asmodeus. This was the second time it appeared, but it was also the last time because adventurers with the ability of the Son of Slaughter could completely destroy it. Zargan was a behemoth of about 10 meters tall. Its whole body was covered with dark scales, and it only had one blood-red eye. Its bloody mouth was full of sharp teeth, and its head looked like an eye demon. The torso and limbs of its body were terrible tentacles. There were 6 tentacles on each side, and the lower body had about 10 tentacles. This terrible monster had a trace of divinity. It was the former Lord of Hell, the ruler of the indigenous people of Bator. When Asmodeus entered Hell, this monster had fought with him, but it was killed by the Lord of Hell. Because it could not destroy its horn, the Lord of Hell finally threw it into the material plane and sealed it. It was a very powerful enemy. When it was first resurrected, it had even defeated the gods. However, its resurrection this time was not very powerful because it had just broken the seal and had not completed the blood sacrifice. It used a kingdom to recover to its peak, but now the Eastern Kingdom was guarded by monks, and the population was scattered. It was almost impossible for it to recover to its peak in a short time. Cloud Monk? Soren saw the monk who was fighting with Zargan. Every move he made was powerful enough to shake the earth. He was a little surprised. A monk with a profession level of 40 or higher? I didn't expect to see it here. He turned around and smiled at Cicada, then said, It seems that you are in trouble. But since you are my chosen, I will lend you a helping hand. A golden beam of light fell from the sky. Soren's figure walked out of the fog and gradually became solid. At this time, the Cloud Monk and the Eastern Princess who were fighting discovered his existence. Shadow Master? God? In the distant outer islands, the great temple of Motor City suddenly shone with golden light, and then countless divine power gathered and rose into a beam of light. Everyone looked at it and then murmured, God's descent? The surging divine power gathered. Soren's figure walked out of the fog, and his body gradually gathered into a solid body. A divine pressure instantly shrouded the battlefield. Come. Soren smiled at Cicada in front of him and said, Lend me your body. Cicada stood up involuntarily, then looked at Soren nervously. The next moment, Soren's golden body gradually merged into her body. A golden divine light appeared in Cicada's eyes, and then she seemed to have broken through some kind of limit and stood directly on the altar. Chapter 1043. A god needed a carrier to descend. Soren could not bear the consumption of divine power, so he had to use Cicada's body in the next battle. However, in the process of descending, Cicada's consciousness would not disappear, but she would be controlled by Soren as a bystander. This was a rare experience that could let her touch the glory of divinity. Because Cicada was a legendary fist master, Soren did not use his curved sword this time. As the golden light gathered, a pair of special gloves appeared in Cicada's palm. It was an item directly made of divine power and was equivalent to a +3 divine artifact. Shadow Nadir. Cicada's figure disappeared in an instant and appeared on the right side of Zargan. After being possessed by Soren, her strength increased greatly and almost surpassed all the monks present. Rapid Strike. Epic Divine Power. As a god, Soren's knowledge was enough to support any class in battle. Zargan's armor was easily penetrated by Cicada's epic divine power as soon as they clashed. Along with Zargan's painful roar, Cicada quickly left bloody wounds on Zargan's body. This was the ability of the monk order. When they served a god, they could get the blessing of divine power. However, most of them were bestowed by divine power. Epic divine power could only be obtained by devout believers above the legendary level. Penetrating Force. Penetrating Shock Palm. Shadow Strike. The power of shadow gathered on Cicada's gloves. When it hit the enemy in front of her, the surging power of shadow and the epic divine power eroded and broke through the ancient evil's defense. In the case of descending, Soren could mobilize Cicada's ability and his own divine power. Shadow Realm. Killing Realm. Death Realm. Some kind of powerful realm blocked the surrounding space. As if sensing the danger of Cicada, Zargan waved more than a dozen tentacles to wrap around her. Sunburst. At this time, the Cloud Monk also reacted. With the vibration of chi, he tried to block the ancient evil in front of him and help Cicada to kill it. Shadow Dance. The Eastern Empress figure turned into more than 10 afterimages. A strange dagger with divine light flowing around it slashed towards the tentacle in front of her. She seemed to want to save Cicada, because that was how Cicada was injured. If it wasn't for Soren's arrival, it would have died. Shadow Leap. However, Cicada didn't seem to care about the tentacles' attacks. The moment the tentacles touched her, Cicada's figure disappeared. The next moment, the cicada appeared behind the ancient evil creature and launched a series of rapid attacks. Zargan's body was badly damaged, but at the same time, it was regenerating at a speed visible to the naked eye. Ancient evil creatures had a terrifying regenerative ability. Even the gods could not easily kill them. Looks like there's still a little trouble. The cicada made a sound, but it was Soren's voice. She suddenly disappeared and reappeared above Zargan. Divine Shockwave. A huge amount of divine power came out with Cicada's punch. The next moment, Zargan's body gradually became bloody. More importantly, under the effect of the divine shockwave, the altar under Zargan's feet was shattering. The power of the blood sacrifice was disappearing. It was obvious that Zargan's regeneration speed had slowed down. God's Descent. Cicada took a deep breath, then put her palms together. Her whole body was shrouded in golden light. She completely ignored the evil aura of the ancient evil creature, as well as all the negative statuses and corrosive effects. She rushed directly to the ancient evil creature and threw a punch. With the golden light, she directly penetrated the body of the ancient evil creature. Space change. The surrounding space was distorted, and the power of the law cut around, directly cutting off Zargan's tentacles. Destructive strike. The divine power exploded with Cicada's fist as the center, directly destroying Zargan's body. All the flesh and blood were torn apart, leaving only the last strange horn. Even Asmodeus, the Lord of Hell, could not destroy this horn. In the end, he could only seal it. Let me deal with it. Seeing that the Cloud Monk seemed to be preparing to seal the horn in front of him, Cicada suddenly said, I have a way to kill him completely. Death, Divinity. Soren's golden body appeared. At this moment, Cicada seemed to have become him. He reached out and held the strange horn in front of him, and then turned into a golden giant hundreds of feet tall. Divine Form. Soren's pupils appeared dark, and then he suddenly clenched the horn in his hand. Death's Hand. The surging divine power of death gathered. Under the terrible impact of Soren's divine power, a crack gradually appeared on the strange horn in front of him. Then, more and more cracks appeared on the surface of the horn. Finally, some kind of unwilling and fearful roar sounded. A twisted soul broke free from it, as if it wanted to escape into the underworld. Soul imprisonment. Soren's mouth showed a sarcastic smile. With a wave of his hand, the twisted soul was imprisoned and finally injected into a gem made of divine power. The golden light dissipated. Cicada's figure slowly floated down from the sky, and Soren's golden body gradually faded away, along with the soul gem. Lord of Shadows. The expression of the Eastern princess was a little hesitant. She hesitated for a moment before whispering. Cicada opened his eyes at this time and said slowly, "Master has left." At the same time, in the sky above the city of Moder, the golden light column gradually dissipated, and Soren's figure appeared inside the temple. During the Avatar crisis, every god's descent consumed a lot of divine power. Under normal circumstances, gods rarely descended. It was precisely because this action consumed too much power. At this time, the light gathered on the great temple had become dim. Soren had almost consumed the power that he had accumulated for nearly 3 months. However, Soren looked at the soul gem in front of him and said playfully, "It looks like a good harvest." Crack. Just now, Soren did not completely kill Zargan. He only destroyed the horn where the soul lived. At this moment, when he crushed the soul gem, the power of the temple began to gather. Suppress. Some kind of terrible scream sounded, and then countless souls flew out from Soren's palm. These were the souls that were devoured by ancient evils. They were extremely evil existences. The gods hated them very much, and one of their abilities was to devour souls. Gate of the Kingdom of God. Soren waved his hand and opened a white light gate. Then, under the influence of divine power, countless souls flew into it and were directly thrown into the pool of shadow reincarnation. Zargan was completely killed at this time. Soren crushed his soul and transferred the souls he devoured into the Kingdom of God. A row of data appeared. You've killed the ancient evil, Zargan. Extracting the target's soul energy. You've gained 3950,000 slaughter EXP. The target has divine power. Extracting the target's divine power. You've gained 22 divinity. Your evil domain has been strengthened. Your order domain has been strengthened. Your crafty domain has been strengthened. A wave of divinity was devoured by Soren. After a while, he opened his eyes and was a little disappointed. There really is no divinity in the ancient evil. This was obvious. Because if there was a divinity, the ancient evil would have become a terrible evil god. But fortunately, Zargan's body was unexpectedly strengthened by the crafty domain. It seemed that his horn could not be destroyed because of the strange, crafty. In the deepest part of the Bator Inferno. Just when Soren completely destroyed Zargan's horn, an ancient existence seemed to have sensed something and opened his eyes. Is he finally dead? The Lord of Hell, Asmodeus, was a creature with dark skin and hair. He had a handsome appearance, blood-red pupils, and a pair of small dark red horns on his head. Asmodeus was dressed in gorgeous clothes, mainly in red and black. He held a strange ruby scepter in his hand, and powerful magic power gathered in it. He once killed Zargan in the process of conquering hell, but there was no way to completely kill him. When Zargan was resurrected, the gods had no choice but to take action again. But now it seemed that Zargan was really dead, because Asmodeus could not feel the existence of Zargan's soul. This soul was sealed by him, but now it had completely disappeared. Shadow Master? The Lord of Hell murmured in a low voice, then slowly said, "The new child of destiny? What will you do in the end? Will it be another Cyric? Or will it be a surprise for me?" Everything returned to darkness. The Lord of Hell did not have much of a reaction to the fact that Soren killed Zargan. When Cyric stole the power of the 3 death gods and almost surpassed the gods, the Lord of Hell only watched silently. The Lord of Hell was very patient. In his long years, he had seen too many people who suddenly rose up. Cyric was a typical example, but his end was not good. Before everything was settled, no one knew what kind of path Soren would take. The gods were quietly watching him. Because of Sirik's example, no one wanted to be the first to act. They were just curious whether Soren would end up like Sirik. For the gods, waiting was nothing. Only the one who had the last laugh would be the winner, and Sirik was undoubtedly not the one who had the last laugh. Some of them thought that Soren would be the same. When Sirik had just become a god, he was so vicious and ruthless. He killed several gods in one breath and almost surpassed the gods. But in the end, he was too arrogant and destroyed himself. If Sirik had been a little smarter back then, he wouldn't have become the king of the dead, Kalimver. Some of the hostile gods were waiting for Soren to self-destruct like Sirik. Chapter 1044. Even though Soren had already left. However, the others still looked at Cicada with a hint of awe. This was the power of a true god. It was so easy to kill the ancient evil that they regarded as their greatest enemy. In fact, the gap between the ancient evil and the gods wasn't that big. However, Soren was now an intermediate divine power, which could be said to be very close to becoming a great divine power. This was equivalent to the main god of a divine system personally taking action. His combat power naturally couldn't be compared to those weak gods. Although the Cloud Monk was very powerful and was already at the top of the mortals, he also had a limitation. That was, he was still a mortal. If the damage that the Cloud Monk caused to the ancient evil was ordinary damage, then the damage that Soren caused to the ancient evil was holy damage. This was the most fundamental difference. The power of the gods was much more important than the power of mortals in all aspects. After the ancient evil was killed by Soren, the evil aura that shrouded here gradually dissipated. The monks began to clean up the battlefield. The Cloud Monk didn't seem to want to communicate with others at all. He directly left by himself. However, just as Cicada was about to leave, the Eastern Empress suddenly walked to her side and said in a friendly manner, "This place is still very far from the monastery. Why don't you go to our camp in front to rest first?" If Cicada was just an ordinary fist master, the Eastern Empress naturally wouldn't deliberately make friends with her. However, if Cicada had Soren behind her, then the situation would be completely different. After seeing Soren arrive and kill the ancient evil in front of her, the Eastern Empress had a deeper understanding of Soren's strength. It was obvious that she planned to make friends with Cicada to ease their relationship and find a way to connect with Soren. Cicada originally wanted to refuse, but suddenly remembered the task that Soren gave her before he left. In the end, she nodded her head. A warrior monk sect. For a girl with almost no experience, it was indeed not easy. Perhaps she could try to borrow the power of the Eastern Empress. Motor City. After killing the ancient demon, Soren had used up a lot of his divine power. But the harvest was not small. Now, his strength had accumulated to a critical point. As long as he broke through the last little limit of divinity, he could directly be promoted to a great divine power. Now, Soren's stats had changed. Name, Soren, Saint Form, Intermediate Divine Power. Race, Half-Elf, Divine Son of Massacre. Attributes, Strength 24, Agility 44, Constitution 30, Intelligence 31, Wisdom 22, Charm 26. Alignment, Lawful Evil Profession, Level 15 Rogue, 03550000, Level 10 Shadow Dancer, Max, Level 10 Wizard, 05425000, Level 18 Arcanist, 06250000, Grade 8. Health points, 925925, Robust, EXP, 630575 Slaughter EXP, 35,545 Profession EXP, Unassigned. Skill points, none Attribute points, none Legend, 350. Divinity, 410, Great Divinity. Requires 900 points to upgrade, Great Divinity. Divinity, 270, Intermediate Divinity. Requires 300 points to upgrade, Great Divinity. Divine Power, 35135400. Requires 1200 divine power to upgrade to Great Divine Power. Master, God's Law. The current storage limit of the divinity is 5,400 points. Clergy, Death, Shadow, Theft, Half-Elf, Rogue, Tracking Domain, Order, Mage, Magic, Tyranny, Strife, Mage, Disease, Poison, Trickery, Slaughter, Death, Fear, Evil, Domination, Piracy, Shadow, Flora Spiritual Energy, Evil Spiritual Energy, Fear Spiritual Energy Status, Normal Basic Skills, Sneak 695, Literacy 585, Steal 625, Pick Lock 575, Snare 515, Focus 525, Negotiate 625, Appraise 525, Deceive 525, Intimidation 695, Taunt 455, Perform 475, Listen 585, Dodge 625, Parry 485, Block 475, Heal 475. Search 575, Detect 655, Copy Scroll 425, Spell Identify 515, Survival 455, Use Magic Equipment 475, Cooking 325, Alchemy 585, Forge Magic Weapon 475. Saint Form, Transcendence, Spell Immunity 1-4, Epic Divine Power, Instant Cast 1-6. Divinity Immunity, Acid, Electricity, Fire, Instant Death, Energy Drain. Divinity Abilities, Space Change, Size Change, Death's Hand, Reality Change, Form Change, Divine Shield, Area Divine Shield, Divine Shockwave, Area Divine Shockwave, Language Proficiency, Character Proficiency, Interplanar Communication, Astral Teleportation, Planar Teleportation. Avatar, Destructive Strike, Create Magic Item, Create Advanced Magic Item, Divine Power Acceleration, Divine Power Creation, Divine Power Spell Specialization, Divine Power Spell Resistance, Divine Power Spell Penetration, Automatic Arcane Casting, Absolute First Strike. Legendary Skills, Legendary Spell Maximization, Epic Mana, Legendary Instant Cast, Legendary Mana Construct, Legendary Tenacity, Legendary Spell Penetration, Legendary Reflex, See Weakness, Perfect Dual Wielding, Omnipotent Hands, Legendary Evasion, Legendary Battle Techniques, Epic Dexterity, Epic Intelligence, Epic Constitution. Special Abilities, Blessing of the Goddess of Magic, God Slayer, Blessing of the Misfortune Goddess, Blessing of the Sea Goddess, Dragon Blood Baptism LV2, Heart of Slaughter, Slayer, Death Walker, Ascetic, Erudite, Blasphemy. Personal Abilities, Nimble Left Hand, Eidetic Memory, Perseverance, Encyclopedic Knowledge, Skilled Spellcasting, Reflex Evasion, Intuitive Evasion, Roll Evasion, Agile Movement, Evade Sight, Dark Vision, Combat Spellcasting, Mobile Spellcasting, Spell Control, Empower Spell, Maximization, Magic Equipment Crafting, Spell Penetration, Advanced Magic Resistance, Advanced Cold Resistance, Advanced Fire Resistance, Advanced Poison Resistance, Advanced Lightning Resistance, Robust, Advanced. Regeneration, 100 feet Telepathy. Profession Abilities, Arcane Memory, Arcane Counterspell, Arcane Runes, Shadow Dominator, Nimble Mind, Military Weapon Proficiency, Curved Sword Legendary. Battle Skills, Summon Shadow, Shadow Jump, 500 meters. Shadow Strike, Shadow Jump, Vampiric Touch, Divinity, Sword Form, 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 Spinning Slash. Inside the temple. Soren sat on the throne and thought. He murmured, only 30 divinity points left. As long as I break through to the level of great divine power, there will be no more obstacles to establishing a divine system. But where should I get these 30 divinity points from? Divinity points. Generally speaking, only true gods had a lot of divinity points. Demigods could only get a pitiful amount of divinity points. Weak divine powers could basically be ruled out. In order for Soren to get 30 divinity points, he would need to kill at least 3 to 5 weak divine powers. This was very likely to offend too many divine systems. There were not many weak divine powers that could be killed at the moment. If it were weak divine powers, Soren would need around 2 targets. The best choice would be intermediate divine power. This could satisfy Soren's needs in one go and directly promote him to a great divine power. Who else can be a target? Soren pondered, constantly recalling the fallen gods in his memory. However, just as Soren was trying to find a new target, a message suddenly came from the bottomless abyss. The 3rd layer of the bottomless abyss, the Forgotten Land. In the magnificent palace of the demon Lord Sauron, a gorgeously dressed Yugoloth quickly walked in. He then carefully said, "Great Lord Sauron. Recently, my caravan has discovered something strange. I think I should tell you." Yugoloths were merchants of the bottomless abyss. They traded with devils and demons. Because they were good at traveling in the river Styx, this race of demons could be found all over the lower plains. On the blazing flame throne, the Baelor demon Lord Sauron opened his eyes and said in a deep voice, "What is it?" The Yugoloth carefully said, "Our caravan has recently discovered that Orcus's undead army has been mobilized on a large scale. A part of the Abyssal army has already set up camp in the south of the Rift Plains, but they have no intention of fighting with the devils. It seems that they intend to invade other planes, most likely material planes. This may be an opportunity." At this point, the Yugoloth carefully raised his head to observe Sauron's expression. If Orcus were to attack other planes, the internal defenses would be weak and empty. If the demon lord in front of him was bold enough, he might be able to seize the opportunity and replace Orcus as one of the abyssal giants. Sauron frowned and said to himself, "Attack a material plane? The undead calamity has already broken out. Where is Orcus mobilizing his army to attack? Demons could not casually enter other planes. The lower the level of the demons, the closer they had to be to the rift planes to pass through." The Yugoloth brought a piece of news that Sauron did not expect. Could it be that Naruto has a new conspiracy? The current Orcus had already become a puppet. The resurrected Orcus was no longer the Orcus of the past. He was only a tool of the undead lords. It can't be the South Coast, right? Sauron seemed to have thought of something, and his heart suddenly skipped a beat. The material planes were severely damaged by the undead calamity. Only the South Coast was relatively intact under the protection of Sauron. There were not many places where Orcus could mobilize his army. Either he intended to provoke the core territories of the other gods, or only the South could satisfy his desire for slaughter and destruction. Send someone to investigate immediately. Sauron ordered the succubus beside him, then said, "You have done a good job. Go down and receive your reward." After that, Sauron's figure disappeared on the spot. The next moment, he directly appeared in the lava pool. "Gather a team of Balrogs." Sauron thought for a moment, then said, "Follow me to sneak into Orcus territory to take a look." There must be something wrong with him suddenly mobilizing his army at this time. The Ghoul King had been subdued by Orcus again. If such a large undead army really wanted to attack a material plane, there were not many targets to choose from. Even Mordor City could be a potential target of Orcus. Sauron had to be careful. Chapter 1045. The unusual movements of Orcus's army made Sauron feel vigilant and uneasy. Although Orcus's strength had been greatly reduced, he was still one of the former 3 giants of the abyss. No matter how weak he was, a starving camel was still bigger than a horse. He was still much stronger than the other demon lords. Of the former 3 giants of the abyss, only Orcus was still alive. There was no need to mention the demon prince, Demogorgon. If it wasn't for his own crazy plan, the most powerful demon wouldn't have fallen so easily. However, although Demogorgon was dead, the 88th floor of the abyss was still controlled by the demons under his command. These demons believed that one day, Demogorgon would be resurrected, and what they had to do now was to wait for the return of the demon prince. The second was the famous, 6-fingered, sovereign of darkness, Glazed. His fall was entirely due to his own death, and there was almost no possibility of resurrection. Glazed, the sovereign of darkness, had been called six-fingered by the adventurers because he had 6 fingers. He had countless crazy plans, and he was the most ambitious demon lord. However, there was only one thing he was famous for so far. That was, during the last time of troubles, he imprisoned the former goddess of wealth, Joaquin. In order to escape the disaster of the time of troubles, the first goddess of wealth tried to bribe the sovereign of darkness, Glazed, and return to her own kingdom through his territory. However, when the goddess of wealth arrived at the territory of the sovereign of darkness, Glazed, the giant of the abyss, did not hesitate to tear up the contract and imprison the goddess of wealth in his territory. This was a long period of imprisonment. Not only did the former goddess of wealth lose a lot of divine power and believers, but she also suffered countless terrible humiliations. It was not until 1371 that the goddess of wealth was rescued by a team of adventurers. However, at that time, her strength had been greatly weakened. This matter was an indescribable humiliation to the gods. Therefore, when the arcane empire rose and trade and wealth regained their dominance, the former goddess of wealth launched an extremely crazy revenge on the sovereign of darkness, Glazed. Glazed, the sovereign of darkness, had fallen at that time. There was no way to record the details of the war, because the destruction of the arcane empire also took away the first goddess of wealth. The current goddess of wealth was a gold member at that time. It was said that she was the carrier of the resurrection of the goddess of wealth. Nobody cared about this. Perhaps the current goddess of wealth still retained the memories of the previous goddess of wealth, but whether or not she was the current goddess of wealth, nobody cared. Orcus was the abyss giant who had died the most times, but he was also the one who had resurrected the most times. Currently, the plane he controlled was the 113th floor of the abyss, Thanatos. This level was unusually cold. It was filled with ice, thin air, and a sky filled with gloomy moonlight. This floor belongs to both the Tanakiri and the undead. In fact, this floor has a slight negative energy predominance. Even so, the purgatory moss and mushrooms still grew at the edge of the frozen soil. Various types of tombstones, imaginable and unimaginable, adorned the frozen landscape. Some stood alone, while others were randomly gathered together. It was like a small graveyard. The undead were everywhere, including demon-hunting spiders, vampire giants, and all kinds of liches. Most of the ordinary soldiers were zombies, ghouls, undead demons, and other zombies that followed the darkness. Orcus had the largest undead army in the abyss. The third floor of the abyss. Orcus' movement of the army could not be hidden from others. The demons active in the upper levels of the abyss immediately discovered it and reported it to Sauron. After the hundreds of thousands of undead army entered the first floor of the abyss, they did not join the blood war. Instead, they approached the plain door that left the abyss. This matter was too strange. Basically, anyone could sense that something was wrong. Sauron was also vigilant. Therefore, he could not sit still and wait for death. He had to take the initiative to attack and see what Orcus' plan was. Therefore, he sent out the assassins under his command to follow the route of the river Styx to the first floor of the abyss. At the same time, he disguised himself as a Vrock and quietly approached the 113th floor of the abyss. This was an unusually cold plane. Basically, most demons did not like this place because the temperature was too low. The air was thin and visible to the naked eye was ice. This was the kingdom of the undead, and also the paradise of the undead. As soon as he arrived, Sauron, who was disguised as a Vrock, encountered a group of zombies. They did not attack Sauron. Instead, they quickly surrounded him. Then, a seemingly intelligent high-level ghoul walked out and said to Sauron, "Vrock? You have been recruited by the great ghoul king, Dorison. The even greater undead king, Orcus, needs to expand his army. Are you going to follow us? Or are you going to feed these zombies?" The demon's threats were always so straightforward. Sauron's acting skills were very good. He showed a hint of nervousness and uneasiness. Then, he said, "Recruited? Are you going to join the blood war in the abyss? If it's a blood war, I'd rather fight than go." Because no one can come back alive. The abyss was famous for its blood war, and almost no one could come back alive. The high-level ghoul thought for a moment and said, "Of course not. Our goal is the material plane. Do you know? A rich material plane. You can destroy and kill as you wish. And not fight against those damned demons." In the abyss, most creatures thought that the blood war was a terrible meat grinder. Sauron immediately said, "If that's the case, I can join you." Most of the demons in the bottomless abyss were filled with desire for the material plane. It was like a playground. The zombies around them parted to form a path. Then, the high-level ghouls said, "Then come with me. There's a portal opened by a lich in front. We can enter the army camp and directly teleport to the Rift Plains." The abyss was a land of chaos. There was no reason to recruit an army here. Even Sauron's demon army, except for the core part, most of them were recruited from the wilderness. Demons changed their camps very quickly. They obeyed powerful leaders. As long as they were strong enough, even spies sent by the enemy would quickly become loyal servants. For example, the succubus maids around Sauron. They were even willing to let Sauron plant a soul imprint on them. They also told Sauron that they were sent to spy on him. But betrayal was too easy for demons. Chapter 1046. The group crossed the cold wasteland. As a huge steel fortress appeared in front of them, countless undead appeared in front of Sauron's eyes. The number was much larger than he had imagined. There were hundreds of thousands of zombies, skeletons, ghouls, and undead demons gathered in the periphery. There were many necromancers and liches inside. Even though Orcus had fallen for so long, the undead army was still terrifying. This did not include the demon army that had been teleported to the first layer of the Rift Plane. A huge undead army was gathered in front of him, and there were also some 5-meter-tall giants walking around. These were vampiric giants, servants of the demons. They used to live in Laterre, but now they were probably summoned by Orcus. There were about 500 to 600 demon-hunting spiders. These terrifying creatures would occasionally kill 1 or 2 zombies, but most of the time, they would just stay quietly. Only the Lord of the Abyss could do this. Without the pressure of the Lord of the Abyss, these terrifying creatures would attack any undead or demons. Ghouls were the main force of the undead army, making up about half of them. Is the king of ghouls, Dor-Isen, here? Zorro thought to himself, the ghoul king, Dor-Isen, is Orcus's warlord. If Orcus returns, he will definitely return to Orcus's side. Seems like the ghouls of the 421st layer of the abyss have also gathered. The mighty undead army gathered here, but most of the low-grade undead could not pass through the river Styx. They could only leave this plane through the teleportation circle. The demon and undead camps were separated. After Sauron arrived, a high-grade undead demon immediately walked over and looked at him. Vrock? Arrange for him to go to the south camp. Orcus was the Lord of the Abyss. Other than the undead, there was also a powerful demon army under his command. The Lord of the Abyss used the most violent method to recruit troops. Sauron had just approached the camp when he saw a large number of Hezru and Berserk demons. There were not many high-grade demons because many Balers did not like to stay with the undead. You will stay here from now on. A Glabrizu demon took over Sauron and arranged for him to stay. It was a small space. In order to provide for these demons, the castle transported a large number of supplies, mainly food. The food was driven by the Anababas. Countless abyssal worms with human faces were driven to the vicinity of the camp and then distributed to the demons. Souls were both currency and food in the abyss. Demons loved worms the most, but most of them were scattered in the wilderness. No demons dared to approach the blood pool. The main reason was that the mother of worms was too powerful and did not allow other demons to approach the blood pool. Even the Balers did not dare to provoke the mother of worms that guarded the blood pool. Only intermediate demons were qualified to enjoy such food. And when the abyssal worms were delivered, there was almost no principle of fair distribution. First, the higher demons took some of them. Then, the middle-ranked demons swarmed up to snatch them. The Hezru snatched most of the worms and chewed them. The slightly weaker demons could only snatch 1 or 2 worms, and there were almost none weaker than that. The low-level demons could only stand aside and watch them chew pitifully. These demons could only eat carrion and bones. The ground was full of blood, and the whole camp echoed with the sharp screams of the abyssal worms. The process of eating soon ended. Under the pressure of the demon lord, most of the demons returned to the camp. Such supplies were mostly provided once a day. The abyssal worms could greatly satisfy the demons' needs, and the low-level demons were completely cannon fodder. As long as they did not starve to death, it was fine. The ones in charge of supervising the demons were the Death Knights, human warriors that Orcus directly resurrected with the power of the scepter. Under the rule of authority and power, the entire fortress maintained basic order. Every time the teleportation gate opened, a batch of demons and undead would be sent away. Sauron played his role very well. Unfortunately, he did not snatch any abyssal worms, but no one cared about this. Demons who were not strong enough did not deserve to have food. Night fell. In the harsh cold, most of the demons returned to the camp. The low-level dretches crowded together like a group of goblins gathering together to keep warm in winter. Sauron's figure quietly left the camp. He escaped into the night, bypassed the sentry post of the Death Knights, and then approached the core area of the fortress. A huge portal appeared in front of him. This was a portal built by a lich. Its main structure was made of bones. Countless bones formed a grand portal that was 15 meters wide and 30 meters tall. There were many huge monsters in the abyss. If the portal was too small, the efficiency would be very low. Because it had been maintained for a day, a group of high-grade necromancers were charging the portal. Because this was the 113th floor of the abyss, which was the territory of Orcus, the portal was not strictly guarded. There were only some Death Knights and high-grade undead monsters. I can't let them teleport anymore. Sauron's heart skipped a beat. He looked at the vampire giants and countless undead monsters in the distance and quietly approached the portal. Orcus has at least 2 planes that can be mobilized, the 113th floor of the abyss and the 421st floor of the abyss. That is, if the portal is maintained. I'm afraid that the whole population of the south coast will not be as many as these undead and demons. How many troops could be mobilized in the 2 planes of the abyss? The number would be at least more than 1 million. If they really attacked the material plane, such a huge army would be completely wiped out in the south. I must destroy the portal. It was not easy to build such a huge portal. Sauron did not need to completely stop the other side, even if it was just a week or 2. The portal was a very delicate thing. Once it was damaged, it would take at least half a month to rebuild. This time was enough for him to prepare and even inform the other gods. If the other gods did not help in this matter, everyone's believers would be finished together. Baelor leader form. With the raging fire, Sauron's figure instantly turned into his original form. The terrible fire spread within a radius of 100 meters. Die. Worm. Sauron's first target was the demon-hunting spider in charge of guarding. Then his huge body flapped his demonic wings and rose into the air. He waved his sword mixed with destructive matter and slashed at the Death Knight next to him. This giant sword weighed nearly a ton, and under Sauron's terrible strength, it directly cut the enemy in half. Flame Whip. The flame whip of more than 50 meters long was thrown out and wrapped around the 3 necromancers in front of him, then quickly burned them to ashes. Fall. Sauron was now nearly 7 or 8 meters tall and weighed more than 8,000 pounds. His strength had reached more than 40 points, so he used the most violent way to tear down the portal in front of him, which was to directly crash into it. Chapter 1047. Boom. The whole ground shook violently. Sauron's Baelor form directly caused cracks to appear on the portal, and then the light gathered on it quickly dissipated. The whole portal had been damaged. But this was not enough. Sauron suddenly clenched the giant beheading sword with both hands and directly slashed it with a 360-degree rotation. Whirlwind slash. Super fierce attack. With a fierce slash, Sauron directly cut off the huge white bone portal in front of him. Then there was a rumbling sound, and the portal in front of him quickly collapsed. Greater teleportation. Sauron, who had succeeded, did not stop at all and immediately used greater teleportation to leave. This was the base camp of the undead. If he was stopped, he might not be able to escape. When Sauron's huge body left, there was suddenly an angry roar from the fortress in the distance, and then the figure of the Ghoul King, Dor-Isen, quickly appeared in front of him. Everything around was filled with fire. Sauron's fire was fierce even in the cold climate, and there was no way to extinguish it. The pupils of the Ghoul King, Dor-Isen, shone with pale green light. He was wearing a luxurious robe and leather armor, wearing a white bone crown, and holding a spine-shaped staff called the Hunger Staff. There was a skull on the top of the staff, which was a tribute to Orcus. Dor-Isen, who was endlessly hungry, had a great affinity for all creatures that were endlessly hungry. He looked like an extremely thin and dirty ghoul. His eyes flashed with a strong green ghoul light, and his feet were like the hooves of a demon. In sharp contrast to his dirty appearance, he was wearing a soft and gorgeous white robe made of human skin and a pale leather armor inlaid with many small skulls. Ghouls were the main believers of Dor-Isen, and his holy emblem was a ghoul's skull. This was a powerful enemy. The Ghoul King, Dor-Isen, had the power of a true god. At his peak, he had reached the level of lesser divine power, and now he was probably above lesser divine power. His clergy was ghoul and necromancy, and his domains were chaos, evil, hunger, illusion, and craftiness. Because of the ghoul race, he was a god and a demon lord at the same time. However, because he was not a pure god, and ghouls did not have much wisdom, Dor-Isen was not seriously affected by the avatar crisis like other gods. He was still a demon lord. Compared to a true god, he was at best a demigod. He had almost no church, and his doctrine was purely about eating to satisfy his endless hunger. Damned Baelor. The king of ghouls, Dor-Isen, did not see Sauron's appearance clearly. He only felt the residual aura of the Baelor. He roared angrily and hit the ground with his scepter and said, "You bunch of trash." He actually allowed a Baelor to destroy our master's important teleportation gate. There was no portal. No one could easily leave the abyss because the Styx was a place that even demons could easily cross, and the evil ships could not transport so many troops. The 113th floor of the abyss. Border. After confirming that the Ghoul King, Dor-Isen, did not pursue him, Sauron calmly returned to his territory. This was the disadvantage of demons. They were chaotic and difficult to command. If the Ghoul King pursued him, there would be internal strife among the undead and demons. There were not many high-level undead with wisdom among the undead, and there were not many demons with brains. Under the chaotic nature, a slight collision would lead to a big fight. Anyway, it was okay to fight, and maybe he could even level up. Demons were like this. They were very thirsty for soul power, even if they could automatically level up after devouring the power of the undead. The rules of the bottomless abyss were extremely chaotic. The Blood Wars could give the highest level of EXP rewards, but even without the Blood Wars, demons could still advance through slaughter. It seems that the south coast has to be prepared. Although the portal of Orcus was destroyed, the undead army that had been sent to the Rift Plain was still huge. If they launched an attack, it meant that humans would have to face a terrible army of hundreds of thousands. Such a force was definitely not something a country could resist because the undead in the abyss were generally more difficult to challenge. Even the zombies were tainted by the evil aura of the abyss, and they were at least 2 or 3 creature levels. In other words, the soldiers of ordinary towns with good equipment could only fight against 1 or 2 low-level undead at most. There was almost no way to fight against those powerful beings. Motor City. The message from the abyss made Soren's heart skip a beat. The south coast was so large that even if he sent out all his forces, he would not be able to defend it. With such a huge army of undead, they could only fight if they hit one place. Otherwise, they would only be defeated quickly. It seems that I have to ask Arendelle for help. Now that Soren had a close relationship with the Frost Kingdom, Princess Royal's attitude towards him was becoming more and more friendly. This kind of big thing could not be forced. If something went wrong, it would be a total collapse. So Soren did not hesitate to ask Arendelle for help. Not only did he ask for the help of the Ice Witches, but he also hoped that Princess Royal would support him. Communication with the gods was very simple. When Soren's message had just been sent to Arendelle, Princess Royal immediately agreed. Let's do this. Princess Royal's voice was directly transmitted to Soren's mind through the temple, and slowly said, "Tomorrow, there will be a group of ice witches teleported to Motor City. I will send a team of court mages to assist. If there is anything unusual, I will also come directly to Motor City." Arendelle and Motor City had a portal. Because it consumed too much power, only important people could be teleported. There were only 5 such portals, which were in Arendelle, the Northern Tower, the Wind Spear Hills, the City of Wealth, and Port Tylon. If the power of the Mies nucleus could be mobilized in the future, the number of portals should also be increased. However, it was impossible to rely solely on portals because it could not be done even during the Arcane Empire. Unless there was some kind of endless and extremely huge energy, and if there was such energy, it would be enough to make the civilization soar to the level of an interstellar civilization. Order the whole city to be on alert. Soren thought for a moment and ordered, put the entire south on level 1 alert. Recall all patrol fleets. Let the Legion camp near the city. Turn on the instant communication device. If there is any large-scale abnormality, immediately let the witches send a message to Motor City. The threat came from the undead. Then there was no need for the fleet at sea to be recalled to defend the city. The attack of the undead should not take too long. Chapter 1048. In a blink of an eye, it was almost December. The arrival of winter did not make Mordor City cold. So far, it was just a light snow. Under the influence of the enchantment that enveloped the entire city, the climate and environment were transformed to be more suitable for people to live in. Soren had been guarding against possible attacks on the south coast. But what he never expected was that the target of Orcus' attack was not the south coast, but Mordor City, far away in the outer islands. Inside the Arcane Tower. When night gradually fell, suddenly a sharp alarm sounded, "Alert! Alert! Abnormality detected. Abnormal spatial fluctuations detected 20 kilometers south of the Arcane Tower. Alert! Alert! An unknown spatial rift has appeared. Arcane Tower entering level 1 state of preparation." Falling sharp alarm sounded. Then in the next second, Soren, Gloria, Fallen Witch, Alice, and Vivian were directly teleported to the top of the Arcane Tower. There was an independent teleportation beacon here to deal with possible emergencies. What's going on? Alice seemed to have just fallen asleep. She was still wearing pajamas, and her beautiful figure was faintly visible. Gloria shook her head and said, "A sudden alarm. It seems that an unknown spatial rift has been discovered." After she said that, she reached out and touched the huge crystal ball, and then a projection appeared on it. The scene in the distance appeared in front of them. A dark red spatial door opened. The whole sky seemed to be torn open, and then countless demons, wraiths, liches, and so on rushed out. They arrived near the 6th town in the south, Black Mountain Town. In just a while, demons rushed in, and then there were sharp screams and alarms. The defenders of the town only resisted for less than 3 minutes before they were broken by a powerful 6-armed snake demon. Then it was a bloody massacre. These undead and demons had no mercy at all. In the blink of an eye, hundreds of people died under their butcher's knife. Countless demons and undead passed through the portal, and in the blink of an eye, nearly 10,000 enemies were teleported to the ground. At this time, the alarm in Mordor City sounded, followed by the sound of the military camp quickly gathering. This reaction speed was already very fast, but it was still not as fast as the speed of the undead. It's Orcus's army. Soren's face turned pale. He never thought that Orcus would dare to attack the city of Mordor. This was like a slap to his face. Directly attacking a god's territory was the most serious form of provocation, and Orcus' actions had pushed Soren to the brink of death. Most of the people in the city of Mordor were Soren's followers, and it was also the core area of his foundation. Even if Soren won this battle, he would have to pay a huge price. Enter full combat mode immediately. Soren directly took over the highest authority of the arcane tower. He glanced at the others and said, Kalina, go and activate the elemental furnace and the Mies core. Gloria, activate the floating device. Prepare the arcane tower to take off. Thaling, activate the lock immediately. Activate the energy protection enchantment and bring Mordor City into the range of the energy protection enchantment. Alice, you go and activate all the golems. Remember. All the golems. Soren solemnly repeated, and then Alice nodded with a serious expression and directly teleported to the bottom of the arcane tower. Emergency combat mode. Emergency combat mode. The cold mechanical voice spread throughout the city of Mordor, and then it continued, Mordor City has been attacked by demons. All combatants are to be on standby immediately. Ordinary people are to return to their residences immediately. Port Mordor garrison is to enter combat mode. Everyone is to assemble in the barracks immediately. Emergency combat mode. Emergency combat mode. The 1st to 7th city guards of Mordor are to assemble outside the barracks immediately. The 3rd to 5th priest regiment are to assemble outside the temple. All wizards with a profession level of 5 and above are to enter combat mode. Please gather near the library within 5 minutes. Dragon Knights are to take off and support the garrison in the southern cities. The 3rd and 6th fleets are to sail in the direction of the inland river. Rumble. With a slight battle on the ground, the arcane tower activated the floating device, and then directly suspended about 50 meters in the air. Then a red light appeared on the neat ground, and with the sound of mechanical activation, a secret door in the basement gradually appeared, and below it was a wide staircase. Buzz. The amethyst energy storage was activated to the limit in an instant, and then in the first wide basement, the golems that were neatly arranged in dense rows opened their eyes at the same time. The 1st Golem Legion is to enter combat mode. The 2nd Golem Legion is to enter combat mode. The Golem Auxiliary Legion is to enter combat mode. The Clay Golem Auxiliary Legion is to enter combat mode. The 3rd Steel Golem Legion is to enter combat mode. Activate the Diamond Golem Squad. Energy transmission. Boom. Heavy footsteps sounded crazily. Under the full operation of the Mies's energy core, a row of 5 golems with a total of 300 quickly walked out of the basement. Followed by the 2nd Golem Legion, the Golem Auxiliary Legion, and the Clay Golem Auxiliary Legion. In just 10 minutes, about 6,000 golems had completed the assembly, and then quickly walked out of Mordor City. Since the establishment of Mordor City, Soren had been stockpiling the number of golems. The current reserve had reached more than 10,000 golems, and now all the golems that had been activated had been equipped with the defense ability. Witches, activate the portal. Soren's cold order sounded, activate the number 23 space waymark. Connect and lock. High Priest, prepare to teleport to the Archbishop. Activate the Diamond Golem emergency response device. Begin teleporting the number 1 Diamond Golem formation. Buzz. A door opened near the laboratory, and then 12 senior witches quickly arrived, and Saruman's figure soon appeared. A portal opened and connected to the nearest teleportation point of the demon army. As early as the 2nd transformation of Mordor City, Soren had set up teleportation beacons inside Mordor City in order to deal with possible sudden attacks. 10 activated diamond golems quickly appeared, and then stepped into the portal. Vivian, Lillian, you go support the front line. Soren nodded, then pointed to the direction of the sea. In front of Port Motor. The surrounding seawater suddenly separated to the left and right, and then a dark mast broke through the waves, and then the ghost ship rushed out from the bottom of the sea. With the appearance of the magic light, the ghost ship directly floated in the air, and all the earthbound spirits automatically became busy, quickly turned the muzzle, and then flew toward the location of the demon army. Arcane Tower activated. Soren's figure turned into a golden shadow, and then said, Super Magic Pulse Cannon charging. Coordinates 23. 14. His god-level perception spread out. Soren instantly locked on to a group of liches and senior demons among the enemy, and said coldly, Start charging. Target locked. Super Magic Pulse Cannon ready to fire. Boom. The silver-white barrel quickly turned, and then it quickly charged at a speed that had never been seen before. Then an energy cannon directly crossed the air and hit a point 20 kilometers away in an instant. Rumble. There was a violent earthquake. Inside the demon army that suddenly appeared, about 50 meters were directly evaporated by the cannon, and glass-like crystals appeared on the ground. Except for a few liches that used accidental teleportation, the rest were completely evaporated. The first city defense force has been assembled. The second city defense force has been assembled. The third city defense force has been assembled. Attack. The drow officer gave the order without any expression, and then quickly gathered the troops and rushed toward the location of the battle. The location of Port Motor. All the naval fleets were in place, and under the command of the officer, they quickly set sail and approached the inland river. At this time, Soren's figure appeared in the temple, and then he said, Gloria, you take over the command of the Arcane Tower. Divine Form. Countless divine powers gathered around the great temple gathered toward Soren's body, and then a golden giant appeared over the temple. Soren took a step and appeared more than 20 kilometers away, and then he slammed his fist on the ground. Area Divine Power Shock Wave *3. A surge of divine power swept across the area within a radius of 300 meters. Soren's domain blocked all teleportation spells, and then a large number of undead fell to the ground in batches. Even the powerful liches could only withstand the third wave of Area Divine Power Shock Wave, and then their whole body turned into ashes like scattered bones. 3 Area Divine Power Shock Waves directly consumed a lot of Soren's divine power. However, it also stopped the enemy's attack in an instant. Soren's figure turned back into the form of a saint, and then he activated his divinity and directly entered the state of Avatar. The figure of the Arcane Tower appeared in the distance. The Quetzalcoatlus quickly rushed to the battlefield, blocking the attack of some flying demons, and at the same time covering the evacuation of the residents in the town. In just 10 minutes, 3 nearby towns had been attacked, and more than 5,000 civilians had died at the hands of the demons and the undead. The mighty army of the undead was still teleporting into the range of the island of Motor. In just a while, the core area occupied by the enemy had gathered more than 30,000 undead troops. Even Soren did not dare to go deep and use the power of divinity to close the portal here, because a powerful demon lord's breath covered this area. Orcus. One of the 3 giants of the abyss, the undead king, Orcus had come to Motor in person. Chapter 1049. Orcus. Its full name was, Demon Monarch of Undead Creatures. When Soren saw the undead king, Orcus in the distance, some information about him had already emerged in his mind. This was definitely a very difficult opponent to deal with. Name, Orcus, Undead Monarch, large otherworld creature, chaotic, evil, transdimensional, HP, 900 plus special attack, command undead creatures, spell-like ability, spells, divine light of fear, poison, summon demon, undead creature summon, Orcus staff. Special feature, damage reduction 25 legendary, kindness, and cold steel, night vision 60 feet, immunity to poison and lightning, cold, acid, and fire resistance 10 each, otherworld creature trait, realm of God, dead talk, telepathy 100 feet. Attributes, strength 45, dexterity 22, vitality 33, intelligence 28, wisdom 28, charm 34. Skills: bluff 600, focus 590, negotiation 600, escape 240, gather information 490, intimidation 600, knowledge 570, listen 530, sneak 520, search 520, observation 500, spell identify 570, necromancy spells 590, detect 550, survival 570, in other planes 590. Specialties: blind fighting, cleave of momentum, combat casting, crafting magic wands, crafting wondrous items, strengthen spell effectiveness, powerful cleave of momentum, spell upgrade, proficient in preemptive attacks, multi-strike, violent attack, instant spell cast legendary abilities, legendary spell casting, multi-strike, undead dominator, undead domain. Spells that can be cast at will: corpse manipulation, blasphemy, charm monster, abyssal darkness, blasphemy, detect kindness, detect magic, detect thoughts, fear, greater dispel magic, greater teleport, lightning beam, polymorph, read magic, suggestion, emblem of death, emblem of pain, clever speech, true knowledge, evil residence, evil divine light, evil shadow strike, firewall. Once a day, retarded spell. Orcus has a spellcaster level of 35. He can cast spells like a level 20 necromancer or level 15 priest. His restriction school is enchantment and illusion. His domain is death, destruction, and evil. Challenge level, 28+. As one of the three great lords of the abyss, Orcus had the power to challenge gods head-on. Even some of the weaker gods were no match for him, even in their true god form. This terrifying abyssal lord had 45 strength, which was the highest among all the demon lords. In other words, there were almost no creatures in the abyss that could compete with his power, and this power did not have any magic effect. The most common power he used was bull's strength. He was one of the targets that the adventurers wanted to capture the most. Other than the abilities that Soren could recall, Orcus also had the abilities of a level 20 legendary necromancer, including but not limited to Meteor Blast, Banshee's Howl, Soul Bind, Wish, Energy Drain, and so on. Orcus could also cast the abilities of a priest up to the 9th circle, including Killing Spell, Lethal Spell, Chaos Mantra, and so on. His domains were death, destruction, and evil. It had special legendary spells such as Mummy's Dust, Collapse, Summon the Undead Army, and so on. In the meantime, Orcus also had Deity's Domain, which gave him omniscience, complete perception, domain knowledge, and other abilities. To put it simply, this domain was similar to Soren's ability in his true god form. This gave Orcus the power to challenge gods head-on and even kill them. But these were not the most frightening things about him. The most frightening thing about Orcus was his weapon, which was the legendary +5 artifact, Orcus Staff. This was a divine artifact that was given the power of death. It was not very powerful in terms of damage. It was just a huge black skeletal staff, but it was given an extremely frightening ability. Any living creature that came into contact with the Orcus staff would have to forcibly trigger a 40 test of death. This meant that any living creature that was weaker than this would be killed by this artifact. Under normal circumstances, only a level 20 pure-blooded warrior would have a 50% chance of being immune, and any living creature that was weaker than legendary would have a 90% chance of surviving. There was less than a 10% chance of being immune. Warning. This power would be triggered as soon as it was touched, which meant that if one was not able to resist the power of death, they would be killed instantly. Just as Soren was looking at Orcus in the distance, the Abyss Lord was also looking at Soren. Both sides felt great pressure. Soren was a mid-level god, and Orcus was the most powerful demon lord. Both sides had the ability to kill each other, but it was hard to say who would win. Attack. Orcus held a huge black skeletal staff and pointed forward. Then, behind the undead army, a few figures that were 5 or 6 meters tall appeared. Vampire giants. These giants that were turned into undead creatures by Orcus were also a huge threat in the abyss. For mortals, they were legendary creatures. At the same time, some evil liches also appeared. They began to cast all kinds of spells to buff the undead knights. The undead army surged forward like a tide. The army from Moder was still on their way. 20 kilometers was not a short distance. Let's give up here. Gloria sighed and said, the golem army is still on their way. There is no way to defend this place. We can only retreat until the army arrives. The number of enemies was too great. In just a short while, there were already 50 to 60,000 undead. The 3 towns in front of him had basically been destroyed. Except for the people who were evacuated by the Quetzalcoatlus Knights at the beginning, the others were basically surrounded by the undead and demons. There were shrill screams and wails in the distance. Soren watched his believers and subjects being slaughtered, and his eyes could not help but show a blood-red light. Nearly 10,000 people were slaughtered by the undead. The power of mortals was so weak that they could not resist the attack of the Abyss Lord. Retreat. Soren gritted his teeth and said. He could not fight against so many enemies in his saint form. Besides, Orcus could join forces with the legendary undead to kill him at any time. The diamond golems formed a defensive formation. The wyvern knights covered the surroundings and killed some flying demons that tried to chase after them. The scattered battles were still going on. More than 12,000 civilians were killed by the undead. Then, the necromancer used their bones to perform an evil sacrifice and summon more undead creatures. Behind Soren, the army of Moder had begun to appear. The priests from the church continued to bless the army with divine spells such as courage, protection, strength, and so on. With the sound of heavy footsteps, the Golem Legion began to appear in batches. Nearly 11,000 golems of various kinds quickly spread out on the battlefield and formed a steel wall in front of the front line. Activate the magic lock. Gloria's voice came from the top of the arcane tower. Then a large light curtain opened, and then a huge magic power shrouded the battlefield in front of them. The magic lock was the most terrible weapon on the battlefield. Since the Silver Age, the High Elves and human great arcanists had tried to build a magic lock for hundreds of years. A complete magic lock included the following abilities: permanent spells, instant large-scale spells, forbidden spells, area anti-magic field, activation spells, permanent effects, and so on. With the activation of the power of the Mies energy core, a cold mechanical voice sounded inside the arcane tower: activate the permanent effect of the magic lock, negative energy protection barrier. Activate the super large enchantment spell, death protection barrier. What was the most terrible ability of the undead? It was not the means to resurrect and summon the undead, but the various negative energy and instant death spells of the high undead. Gloria activated a large protective negative energy barrier, and at the same time, activated the power of the anti-death barrier. Within the range of the magic lock, most of the instant death spells would lose their effect, unless the power was enough to break through the limit of the magic lock. In this case, one would need a casting level of at least 35 or above. At present, it seemed that only Orcus could do it among all the undead and demons in front of them. Shadow, Realm. The gray shadow shrouded the space, and Soren's figure appeared in midair. All the rogues who believed in and served him became hazy for a while. Under the blessing of Soren's Shadow Realm, their sneak and hiding ability gained an additional 50 points, and their evasion ability gained a hazy bonus of 10 points. There was no limit to the number of times they used shadow power. The shadow power mobilized by abilities such as Shadow Strike, Shadow Raid, and so on was directly provided by Soren. Order, Realm. Soren's divine power resisted Orcus's realm of chaos and offset all the negative effects it brought. Slaughter, Realm. Death, Realm. Soren activated one realm after another. The Pirate Realm strengthened the morale of the army, the Fear Realm counteracted the fear aura of the High Undead, the Magic Realm strengthened the Spellcaster's penetration, and the Slaughter and Death Realm suppressed the undead army in the distance. Gloria and Fallen, which appeared at the top of the arcane tower. Vivian and Lillian stood on the deck of the Deadman's Voice. Alice appeared behind the diamond golem. Saruman's body was surrounded by twisted vines. The high priest stood silently behind Soren, and on the side was the bishops led by the divine priest Milan. The giant's burly figure was covered in plate armor, and behind him was a team of heavily armored warriors. The golem army opened a 3-kilometer-long defense line. In front of them, countless undead appeared from the portal in the distance. The demon army gathered on the left, and the undead army formed a battle formation on the right. The huge army of more than 200,000 almost filled the space in front of them. Orcus's figure was so conspicuous among the countless undead. As he clenched his scepter and pointed forward, the fully assembled enemies began to attack. Countless undead and demons rushed forward like a raging tide. This was the real Abyss army. Even in the Blood War, such an Abyss army was enough to fight against the elite demons. You're tuning into the Dreamy Love Stories YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.